Buenos dias, good morning. On behalf of my amiga, the president of Mercer County Community College, President Wang, I have been asked to let everyone know that there is a policy here. We must wear masks indoors. Gracias.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our gathering for today. My name is Kenneth Clayton, and today is the anniversary in September of 1957. 9 Black school children who are African American to be escorted into school to have access to an education that was rightfully theirs. Today in New Jersey, we are experiencing the same thing where people of color, children of color, are being negated and neglected in their right to have education that they are rightfully accessible to. Today, we are here to hear from people, educators, and people who are schooled in this, the reality that we're living with, who are going to help us try to overcome here in our state. We're also going to have policymakers here who will help us make New Jersey a more equitable place to live in for our children to learn in. And we're also going to seek to come together as a community of people who are committed to making New Jersey a more equitable place where all of us can live and learn together. It is my joy to present our co-host, Dr. Willie Francois.
Sure, if we're able to. President, may we unmask? Only when we speak. Got it. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. So grateful for my co-host, co-convener for opening us up today. As he has indicated, today is a very important anniversary that is so often overlooked, the anniversary of those 9 children who faced militarized white supremacy as they were just seeking an education which this country owes to every child. And we know that it was Brown v. Board that overturned the Plessy Doctrine. But in spite of Brown v. Board's decision, there is still so much segregation all over our country. Over half of the children in this country are in deeply segregated schools, and our state is one of those states. You all may be aware that there is a lawsuit, the LAND lawsuit, the Latino Action Network against the state of New Jersey, has sued the state for its education segregation. We are number 6 in segregation for Black students, number 7 in segregation for Latinx students. And because of the tightness and the clear vision, the clear moral vision of New Jersey state constitution, it is clear that segregation for any reason is unconstitutional. And so that's why we're here today. We're here today because our state is functioning against its own constitution, because so many of our children are living, are being educated in schools that are separate and unequal, that in this state that is so blue, we like to claim, so wealthy, we like to claim, is a state where Plessy is still alive, where segregation is still alive. And today we are deciding as a community, as a state, as a coalition, we are saying no more. And so as we are here to learn, but we're also here to take action. Our governor will not be with us today, and that is a crying shame. And so we're here to take action. There's so many electeds who will pop in via Zoom, and electeds who will be in the space today. A few will be in the space today, and we're here to let them know that no more to segregation because of the material harms that it inflicts on primarily non-white students, but also the psychic harms that it inflicts on both those who benefit from segregation, who profit from segregation, but also those who live on the underside of segregation. So that is why we're here today. We're here today to make our state live up to what it says on paper, but we're also here today to make sure that the promise of Brown is actually realized here in our state. So today we'll hear from a civil rights lawyer, a former legislator, one of my heroes, Myron Orfield. He'll lead us in some fresh data. What he gives us today is fresh, never before seen. So you will be witness and audience to significant research that we know will change the course of this movement. Then we'll hear from some of the top experts in our nation about what they have heard about the state of segregation in our schools here. And then after lunch, we will have an award ceremony where we will recognize some of the most powerful leaders in our state on the ground and in our legislature. And then we will have a policy prescription. I know that is why everyone is here. We will hear what the problem is, but we will also hear how we are going to fix it as a state. And so you will hear a policy prescription from our coalition that we know that should be endorsed by every legislator, but we also know that you will give a rousing amen to. After we have had that experience where we share what our policy proposal is to fix segregation in our schools, then we will have more experts, more community leaders who you will hear affirm how important it is. And I know they will affirm it just because it's a great plan. I'm telling you now, it is a great plan that I'm looking forward to sharing with you all. And then we will hear from some more of our statewide leaders, union leaders, school leaders, community leaders. So we are in for a packed day. There's some ground rules that I want us to abide by as we're moving forward. There is a timekeeper. So for all of our brilliant speakers, I want you to know there is a timekeeper, and we're so grateful that she is with us today. Sister Joyce came all the way from the Atlantic County area to be with us today, and we're excited about that. So to all of our speakers, she will be keeping us on task, and I do hope you will honor her assignment as you are honoring your assignment. And then we will not be taking questions from the floor, no, not verbally or vocally. We will not be taking questions from the floor, but there are question cards that you will be able to use and to submit so that we can respond to your questions. And they're so accessible that it even indicates the person that you want to submit that question to. So please make full use of those question cards. We will not be eating in this space. We will not be eating in this space. And as our president has told us, we will remain masked in this space as we move throughout this day to ensure that we are educating our state, but also that we are putting pressure on our lawmakers, as we know so many children are really living under deep issues of concentrated poverty and concentrated powerlessness that we cannot allow to continue in what we think is the greatest state in all of the states in this union. Yes, I'm so grateful now that we get to introduce one of our sisters in this work. Pastor Karen is coming to lead us in a spiritual reflection and to ground us in some meditative and prayerful experience. So Pastor Karen, thank you.
I'd like to begin by saying that it's a privilege to be a part of this initiative. The church that I serve is only one block from Hedgepath Williams Middle School of the Arts. And if you don't know the history, these two women, Black women, mothers, worked together to desegregate the New Jersey public schools in 1944, 10 years before Brown versus the Board of Education. Not everyone knows this, but everyone should know this, that we have history as a state to want to make sure that our schools are desegregated. And it's been painful for me to watch over these 26 years that I have served Westminster Presbyterian Church go from a desegregated school to a segregated school. So when Paul Scully invited me to be a part of this initiative, I said, presente. So for the Latine, that's not Latinx or Hispanic, it's the new term that we'd like you to consider adopting for the Latine community. When we say presente, it means that we are fully dedicated in body, mind, and soul to whatever it is that we're being called to do. So I have just a few quotes that I think are apropos for you to reflect on as our spiritual reflection. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. Martin Luther King Jr. Reinhold Niebuhr. Nothing that is worth doing can fully be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context or history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we must be saved by love. And last but not least, Marian Wright Edelman said, just because a child's parents are poor or uneducated is no reason to deprive the child of basic human rights to health care, education, and proper nutrition. Education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving their community and world better than you found it. Education is a precondition to survival in America today. Let us pray. God of unconditional love and justice and mercy for all, we come before you to welcome you and to make this place a holy place separated for your purposes. We give you honor and acknowledge you as our creator and provider. It is you who are omnipresent. You are everywhere, oh God. You make yourself known in the midst of the cries of your people of all races, cultures, faiths, and sexual orientations, who experience oppression of every and any kind. It is you who are omnipotent. You have all power to break down the walls of hostility that divide us, to tear down the empire that oppresses us all. God of all leaders, el mero mero, we give you thanks for calling and empowering all the members of Building One America. Continue to turn their heart, mind, and strength toward you as they seek justice, and specifically as they seek equal quality public education for your children. We ask that you continue to bless the participants here gathered and those who are supporting this endeavor as they seek shalom, paz, salam, pyongwa, and peace through justice for all your people. We pray in our separate ways in your mighty name. Amen. So it's also a privilege to introduce President Wang. And instead of referring to the bio that was posted on the website, I want to tell you that she has truly been a colleague, and she has used her resources to help address needs in Trenton. So I'll give you my example. A couple of years ago, when I invited her to consider supporting the Latinx community that was growing in Trenton, I asked if Westminster Presbyterian Church could be a location for not just teaching Spanish, but also helping our mayor and the police director and social workers and nurses and religious people to not just learn the phrases in Spanish, but to actually get to know the culture so that they can be more effective in reaching in to the Latinx community. So for that, I really am appreciative to President Wang. Bienvenida, amiga y colega, friend and colleague. Welcome.
Thank you so very much for your kind words. Good morning. Welcome to you all. If this is your first time visiting Mercer, welcome. And if this is not your first visit, welcome back. This is one of the very few, our Congresswoman just arrived, I think. Oh no, this is my colleague, Diane Campbell. She looks like a Congresswoman. Welcome back. And this is one of the very few events that I authorized to be held in person on this campus. We are still not doing normal in-person operation. Our instructional activities going on. 61% of students are studying to some extent in person on this campus right now. We have about 6,000 students right now studying at this college. For the first time in the history of this college, 25% of our students are Latinas. Amen. And this is in spite of the pandemic impact. You can well imagine, because those minority committee students retreat most, as our keynote speaker will tell us, statistically it shows that it negatively impact the minority population most. So in this environment, we retain African-American student population. We increase the Spanish-speaking serving population. In this environment, we're extremely proud and pleased to do that. So besides saying welcome, I want to say that this is a real milestone for New Jersey. In this environment, more than ever before, what you are about to do today is more than ever needed, because we see it. I see it every day when I walk on around campus and talk to students. They are struggling mightily. This morning, our foundation board is having a retreat. So right after this, I have to go back to the retreat. We started at 8 a.m. And I gave an example of a student I want to share with you. This week, Wednesday, I was touring our student service center, and there was an African-American young man looking so desperate. And the staff member was trying to help him, and he kept saying, I give up, I give up. I can't continue anymore. And so my staff member saw me and said, oh, here's Dr. Wong, come over. And I walked right over and I looked into the young man's eye, and he was so down and under. And he said, I need to go, I want to drop everything. And I said, don't go away. I want to talk to you. So I pulled him aside. He told me his car got flooded. His wallet was stolen. When he was walking on the street, somebody snatched his backpack. Today, he came on campus with his only possession, which is a laptop, and it got stolen on the campus. So there is no hope for him. He said, don't have textbooks, I don't have the computer, and I don't have a car. I cannot continue. And I said, you will have all of it, and you will continue. So follow me. So I took him into an office of a staff person. I gave his hand to that woman and I said, help him and make sure he doesn't leave the campus until he has everything he needs to continue, and call me when it's done. Half an hour later, my staff called me and said, he is so happy. Not only he's continuing, he added another class because he didn't know he has all the resources. We give him the money to fix his car. We give him the new textbooks in the bookstore through our book vouchers program. And we gave him a laptop through the federal stimulus funds that are available to students. So I'm here to say, segregation is a fancy name. Opportunity is a real thing. We need to make sure opportunity is available to everyone. Whether this person is Black, brown, purple, yellow, doesn't matter. I stand in front of you as a Chinese American, first generation. I was born, raised, educated in China. My family did not think I was a college material and did not want me to go to college. And now I'm a college president in a foreign country. Think about that. How did that happen? Because someone believed that I was a college material. And that someone happened to be my grammar school Chinese teacher. And she told my mother, your daughter will become a college professor one day. My mother doesn't even understand what a college professor means because she never went to school herself. But she believed in a teacher. So she said, okay, so what does that mean? And it means I need to go to college. And she said, oh, I don't have money. You're going to have to figure it out on your own. I figured it out on my own with the help of others. And I not only went to college, I went to the graduate school in China. The first female in my entire hometown ever went to that graduate school. It's called the Beijing University. So the day one I graduated, I became a college instructor because I want to give back. So the reason I became an administrator is because I want to help more students. And that's why I do what I do. And also Mercer believe in opportunities for all. When I came in 2015, Trenton was the only school district that does not have a dual enrollment articulation agreement and program with Mercer. And for those of you who don't know what dual enrollment means, you're a high school student, you earn college credits while you are finishing your high school courses. So that means it introduces you to college before you get to make a decision whether you're going to college or not. So that's what I call it, opportunity. People don't even know what does college mean, and let alone what major you want. We do all these sorts of very stupid things, counterintuitive. Ask a 17, 18-year-old, what do you want to major? Ask yourself, when you were 17, 18, do you know what you want to do with your life? Right? So when they don't know what the major will say, you see, you're not a college material. So go to trade school, go to work. That's the system that we have. And so I believe that we need to introduce college into every high school, not just West Windsor. You know, I have visited most of the school districts in Mercer County, and you compare what West Windsor has, and you compare to Trenton High, it's two worlds. They are 6 miles apart, but they are two worlds. So I wasn't happy with the fact that Trenton doesn't have, I know I need to stop, doesn't have the school, the dual enrollment program. So I went to work, we raised money. We raised $75,000 a year to support a Trenton dual enrollment program. Today, I'm happy to report we serve about 40 Trenton high school students every year. Free of charge to every single one students. We pay for their textbooks, we pay for their tuition, we even include the transportation. So they get to get out of Trenton, come to West Windsor campus. Some of them have never been here. They have never been a real college campus. So I know it's life-changing, and I know you are here to do the work. I urge each of us to do real opportunity, dual opening thing, and do what we can one student at a time. So have a great conference. Thank you for being here, and thank you to allow the Mercer to be part of it. It's my job now to introduce the expert that you all want to hear from, and Professor Orfield, who is law professor, but also director of the Institute on Metropolitan Opportunity at the University of Minnesota Law School. I'm pretty sure he will enlighten us all about a lot of data and what are the best practices in the field, so we can all take something. I wish I could do, but my friend will share with me after I leave. I have to return to my foundation board retreat. We are looking for new money to support our students. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the switch. Well, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. It's a privilege to be here with you and people that are thinking about taking action to address the profound inequalities of New Jersey. This case, the Latino Action Network case, is one of the most important civil rights cases in the United States and one of the most promising if there can be a coalition to support these civil rights activities, a coalition like there was in the 60s with churches and officials and local officials.
Sorry, just keep going.
I would use the clicker. One of the things that we need to talk about to begin with is about segregation. And if you take a look at New Jersey is a segregated place. As Pastor Francois said, it's the 6th most segregated state in the United States. It's worse than the states of the Confederacy. It's worse than all the states of the Confederacy except Texas. And this is ironic in the sense that New Jersey has some of the strongest civil rights laws and has some of the most powerful principles of equity that lie in abeyance. Segregation is never about choices. Sometimes people like to say we're segregated today because people have chosen to be segregated. That's one of the most false things that people ever say. Segregation is about profound levels of discrimination, particularly against African Americans and Latinos. Profound levels of discrimination in mortgage lending. A Black family in New Jersey that earns $175,000 is less likely to qualify for a prime loan than a white family that earns 40. As African American and Latinos seek housing, they are systematically steered to certain types and places in the community, and white families of the same income, credit history, and education are steered away from them. We have exclusionary zoning that shapes our land use. We place the affordable housing in the poorest non-white communities. Systematic, continual, illegal, unredressed discrimination that shapes our country. Segregation is illegal and it's detrimental, it's destructive. Martin Luther King said that segregation is the modern form of slavery with certain sorts of legal niceties. Segregation destroys children's opportunities to graduate from high school and goes to college. It destroys children's opportunities to find middle-income jobs and wages. It destroys opportunities that the children that are victims of segregation have to shape and be part of America. Segregation creates isolation and hopelessness. It never works. It never has worked. And the Supreme Court was correct when they said that it creates a situation that's inherently unequal. You can see the maps in New Jersey here. You can see the areas that are red are more than 80% non-white in the orange areas. You can see many of the first ring suburbs and the central cities. Segregation is not just an issue of the cities, but also many of the suburbs. Because we didn't deal with segregation in the 60s and 70s, segregation is now recreating itself in dozens and dozens of older suburbs as it sweeps out and destroys more and more communities and robs them of opportunity. This is the percentage of Black and Latino students in school districts in 2016 and 17. And this is the percentage of kids eligible for free lunch. And in America, if you are Black and Latino, you have double segregation. In America and New Jersey, if you are Black and Latino and poor, 70-some%, more than 70% of Black and Latino kids go to schools that are overwhelmingly poor. So segregation means poverty, and the poverty in schools is what destroys opportunity, the concentrations of poverty. If you're white and poor, the odds are you're going to be in a middle-income school district because white poor people are not victims of the same levels of severe housing discrimination that Blacks and Latinos are. Segregation and poverty are linked together. This is the percentage that meet or exceeds standards. If you take a look at the percentage of poor kids in a school district, you can predict with 91.91 correlation, not almost overwhelming, the test scores. If you look at the poverty in the school district, you can predict the test scores with almost perfect accuracy. And so when people are talking about schools that are failing, schools that are low performing, every school that reaches that level of poverty has the same kinds of test scores. And there's very little power to change those things all by themselves. This was reading, and this is math. And this is the correlation. And you can see this is the percentage correlation between poverty and race. And you can see that if you are in a school district that is very non-poor, if you take a look at the small one, it's very white. And as you take a look at the schools that go up to the highest percentage of poverty, they're almost all racially segregated. There's a powerful correlation. And this is the percentage of low-income or Black or Hispanic students by district. And poverty and race are locked together. The pattern of racial segregation locks race and poverty together. This is proficiency. And again, if you look at the poverty rate of a school, you can predict the test score. As schools become poorer, the test scores go down. They always do. And sometimes we say we have these high stakes testing regimes that are almost impossible for the school districts that are becoming poorer to make their test scores go the other way. That's reading and math. Despite some gentrification in the city and the state's growing diversity, the urban districts have remained intensely segregated at apartheid levels. So you can see Atlantic City went from 91 to 96. Camden stayed at 99. Elizabeth is 92. Jersey City went down a little bit to 85, but still profoundly segregated. Newark is at 92. Patterson at 95. Trenton at 99. These are apartheid levels of segregation in all the major cities of the country. And one of the most progressive states in the country with one of the best constitutions, there is urban apartheid in almost every school district. And that urban apartheid, as it destroyed children's lives in the past, continues to destroy children's lives and opportunity in the future. And it's not their fault. It's not their choice. It's what's being imposed upon them. It is the modern system of slavery. Many suburban districts have become more diverse as Black and Latino families have moved to the suburbs. And if you look at America, more than half of all Black and Latino families live in the suburbs. If you look at Black and Latino families in the middle class, 2/3 have moved to the suburbs. If you look at Black and Latino married families with children, 80% have moved to the suburbs. As Black and Latino families move to the suburbs, they experience stunning levels of housing discrimination. The Black families that earn $185,000 a year they have less prime loan credit than white families that earn 40. That limits their choices. In New Jersey, real estate agents show Black families a whole different series of suburbs than they show whites of similar education, income, and credit history. If there's affordable housing built in the suburbs, it tends to be in the poorer, more diverse suburbs, not in the wealthier and whiter ones. And these systematic levels of discrimination not only hurt Black families' opportunity, they often lose the value of their houses as these communities resegregate, but they keep playing a filthy, terrible game with people that have played by all the rules and done everything right. And because of this constant, unrelenting discrimination that no one does, that these diverse districts in the suburbs, they resegregate. They are diverse for a while, and the forces of steering, the forces of mortgage lending, the forces of exclusionary zoning, the exclusionary white powerful suburbs that are isolated and out of limits for Black and Latino families, they cause the resegregation of these older communities. This is a map that shows New Jersey's racially diverse places. And if you can take a look at this map, you can see northern New Jersey. You can take a look at the entire state in the middle. You see the Camden area and the Trenton area. And this is in 1999 and 2000. And if you're looking at this map, the areas that are red are school districts that are predominantly non-white. And in 1999, there were 39. The schools that are orange are highly diverse. They're between 40 and 60% non-white. The schools that are green are moderately diverse, between 20 and 40% non-white, and the blue schools are overwhelmingly white. So you can see that in 2000, there were 39 predominantly non-white suburbs, some of the poorest places in New Jersey, often poorer than the cities they surround. You can see 44 highly diverse, 76 diverse, and about 208 predominantly white. Look a decade later. If you take a look a decade later, you have now 70 of the suburbs are predominantly non-white, up from 44. You have 100 moderately diverse suburbs. You have the predominantly white 147. So you can see integration is changing America. The suburbs in America are different now than they were in the civil rights movement. They are diverse. In some ways, this integration of the suburbs was the greatest hope of the civil rights movement, the unfinished business of Martin Luther King. These suburbs that are racially diverse are the beloved communities that he sought to create. In these places that aren't utopias, these integrated suburbs are where the Black and Latino and Asian college students come from almost entirely. These are the paths of opportunity. There's almost nobody that's coming out of these central cities to college. In fact, in these central cities, most of the young men are dropping out because of segregation. Robert Balfonts at the University of Rochester calls segregated high schools dropout factories. And he looks at segregation throughout the country, and everywhere segregation creates dropout factories. And you can take a look at these suburbs, they're diverse. Now, that's the good news. These are places where race relations are the best, governance works well, people get along. It's not a utopia. I'm not saying that anything's perfect, but in America, these are places where Black and white and Latino people have the most positive views of each other. That's the good news. The bad news is because of relentless discrimination in school boundary destroying and steering and mortgage lending, these suburbs are forced to resegregate. So you can take a look. Here's 2009 and 2010. Here you can see New Jersey in the 2019, and you can see now you've got 100 predominantly white suburbs, up from 40 a few decades ago. These suburbs that were once diverse are predominantly non-white. They have been redlined. Their business districts have hurt. Their tax base has taken a hit. They are being treated the same way that Camden and Trenton and all the other big cities were. They're the same forces that imposed slavery on those districts is imposing the same slavery in dozens of the older inner ring suburbs. Racially diverse towns and districts are in trouble, but they also create a powerful opportunity for change. There are twice as many members of the New Jersey legislature that live in racially diverse suburbs as live in majority white suburbs. Twice as many members of the legislature. There are twice as many members of Congress. These racially diverse suburbs elect governors. They elect senators. They're powerful places, and they need to exercise their power. If there's going to be a solution here, these places, in addition to the central cities, have to be heard. They're not at the table. They don't have an identity. And if they don't participate, you can see what's going to happen. They create a powerful political opportunity for change. In the 1960s, Martin Luther King and civil rights leaders were asking the white suburbs for mercy. Today, these racially diverse suburbs have the power to create justice. You can take a look at what happens in these maps. These are maps that show as you move through the path of resegregation, communities get devastated. They lose their tax base. They lose their ability to produce revenue. These places become, in many ways, more isolated than the central cities they surround. Where central cities have a chance to sometimes gentrify or redevelop, these places don't often have those arts or amenities or culture that they can build around. And when poverty and this kind of slavery settles in these places, it hits them twice as hard, and it's twice as hard to make a difference. This is a map that shows, or this is a chart that shows what happens. And one of the things you can see is you see the predominantly white suburbs, and this was in 2000 to 2006. About 48% of them became racially diverse. Of the moderately diverse suburbs, about 30% of them in a 10-year period became highly diverse. Of the highly diverse suburbs, almost all of them became predominantly non-white. Of the highly diverse suburbs, 38 out of 41 made the transition to total segregation. And you can take a look, here's a longer period of time. You see this process. Because we don't deal with discrimination in New Jersey, the places that are diverse temporarily, and those patterns are repeated over and over again, and they do the same harm in this large swath of suburbs that they did generations ago in the mighty cities of New Jersey. This is a map that shows the places that are resegregating. So you had there were 63 suburbs that went to become predominantly non-white in a 20-year period. 63 suburban districts moved from highly diverse to predominantly non-white. 73 moved from moderately diverse to highly diverse. 98 moved to moderately diverse from predominantly white. What we want to do is we want to maintain this diversity. These beloved communities where you have racial diversity, where you have opportunity, where you have better race relations, we want to help them maintain their diversity and maintain that status forever so that they can be strong and that they can renew each other, and that the advent of a few people of color doesn't mean that the real estate market is going to destroy the community, the banks are going to destroy the community, discrimination is going to go on. You can take a look. This is a picture of New Jersey and the population. The one chart shows New Jersey in 2020, and it shows the racial mix of the students in New Jersey. It's about 52% white, 12% African-American, 22% Latino, and 10% Asian, and 4% other. The New Jersey public schools are more diverse, and they are a predictor of what the state of New Jersey is going to be in a generation. 43% white, 30% Hispanic, 14% Black, 3% other. This is what New Jersey's schools are now, and that is what New Jersey will be in a few years. This is the New Jersey public schools. We talked about this, a picture. Now let's take a look at some of our areas. This is the metropolitan ring of Trenton. And you can see all the schools in their pie charts. You can see the schools in the inner ring suburbs. You can see Trenton, you can see Hamilton Township. Now, one of the things that's, I think, interesting is you take a look at Hamilton Township, you look at Lawrence Township, you look at East Windsor. These are districts, they're almost perfectly integrated if you're thinking about the region. These places, if every school district were like these school districts, if every one school district had the composition that Hamilton, Lawrence, and East Windsor has, if everyone was like that, there would be no segregation in the Trenton metropolitan area. There would be not a single segregated school. If every school district could be as opening and welcoming as Hamilton, if every school district could be opening as welcoming as Lawrence, if every school district could be as opening and welcoming as East Windsor, we would abolish segregation in the Trenton metropolitan area. This doesn't seem so scary to me. This seems like if they can do it, and these are high performing districts that send their children to college. These are some of the best districts in the state, and they're doing everything right. They are the beloved communities, but the problem is there's not enough Hamiltons, Lawrences, and East Windsors. If you look beyond, there are wealthy, white, predatory districts that will undermine and hurt the other districts, will shape the discrimination. But if everyone could be like that in Trenton, there would be no segregation. Here's Atlantic City, and you can see the diversity of the schools in Atlantic City. And you know, the blue part of the pie is white, the red part is Black, the orange is Latino, the green is Asian. Now, if you can see Greater Egg Harbor and Egg Harbor Township and Greater Egg Harbor, these places are perfectly integrated. If every school in the Atlantic City region is doing as well as Egg Harbor and Greater Egg Harbor, if they were creating that, there would be no segregated schools in the Atlantic City metropolitan area. Segregation would be over in New Jersey. New Jersey would go from the 6th worst state in the country to the best state in the country if everyone could behave as well as Egg Harbor and be as open as Egg Harbor Township. Here's the Camden Public Schools. And again, high, devastating segregation in the city and growing rapid change in places like Pennsauken Township. Again, if you take a look at this region, if you look at Black Horse Pike, if you look at Cherry Hill Township, these places are perfectly racially integrated, powerful, strong schools filled with opportunity. If every school in the Camden area was as good as Black Horse Pike and Cherry Hill Township and being open and diverse and welcoming, there would be no segregation in the Camden metropolitan area. This is the Newark metropolitan area, and you can see the profound isolation of Newark, one of the most segregated systems in the country. Again, look at Woodbridge Township, look at South Plainfield, look at South Orange Maplewood, look at Montclair, look at Morris Township. These schools are integrated on this metropolitan level. And if every school did as good of a job as Woodbridge and South Plainfield and South Orange and Montclair and Harris, there would be no segregation in the Newark metropolitan area. It would be, and this is not such a big challenge. Schools and race and segregation are not just about money. They're not just about textbooks. They're not just about teachers. Schools are social networks. In America, all of us white people, a lot of us think that we pulled ourselves up by our own bootstraps, that we've worked hard and we've done better than everybody else. But the reality is we've had a chance to be involved in networks. When you apply to college, the quality of your high school, as the college rates it, the grade that the colleges give your high school is as important or more important than your grades and your test scores. Certain high schools, when you have a high school that's racially diverse, that has a mix of people, that is powerful, colleges, hundreds of colleges come to visit those high schools. And people that cross the threshold into that high schools become involved in a world and a network of opportunity. Very few of us find our first job, our most important economic role from our test scores or our grades. We find it from contacts from the people our parents know, from the people our teachers know, from the networks we live in. America is a melting pot, except for Black and Latino people. And when you become part of that melting pot, you become part of the network of opportunity. And this is one of the things that devastates poor children. When you grow up in a school district where no one has been to college and no one knows anybody that's been to college, it's hard to find it in your life, how to do that. You know, your parents are the most powerful predictor of whether you succeed, the education income of your parents. After that, it's the kids that you go to high school with and the networks that you exist in. So I'm going to look at opportunity, and this is a map that shows the percentage of free and reduced lunch, proficiency in reading, and the tax capacity of the local school districts. This is a way to think about places that are minimum opportunity, the orange places, places that are low opportunity, the yellow places, places that are high opportunity, the blue places, maximum opportunity, the green places. And one of the things we need to think about is there's a lot of people that are in that minimum and low and medium. And we need to work together, especially with the maximum opportunity districts, to help them help us and create a better New Jersey. This, you can take a look at the legend in the area. You can see the hot maximum opportunity school districts, many of them in the second ring of suburbs. This is Trenton. You can take a look at this. Now, we are up against very serious foes in this state with a mighty constitution and a liberal governor. The plaintiffs in this lawsuit have been treated with a stone wall of opposition. The plaintiffs have brought this lawsuit in good faith, and in this liberal state with this mighty constitution, they have met a stone wall of opposition. In this state, with this mighty constitution, we have powerful institutions that profit by segregation. We have charter schools that profit by education with management companies that grow rich. We have housing developers who spend twice as much building low-income housing in poor neighborhoods and powerfully try to keep that housing out of other areas. We have law firms that charge $500,000 to help white districts secede from their relationship with Black districts. We have law firms that take public money in white districts and systematically, illegally, are contrary to all the laws of New Jersey. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars attacking the poor districts they're partnering with, humiliating the poor districts they're partnering with, exhausting the poor districts they're partnering with, bankrupting the poor districts they're partnering with, demoralizing the poor districts they're partnering with, and illegally seceding. And the administration, even the present administration, is allowing these constant secession, illegal secessions to occur that are demoralizing, that are contrary to law, that prevent the possibility of this state from fulfilling its affirmative duty under the New Jersey Constitution to create an integrated system. So these are the things that I'd like you to talk about. I'd like you to realize your power. I'd like you to realize what we're talking about in terms of an integrated system is not that hard to achieve, and that many of the best school districts in New Jersey are achieving that goal of integration. And these schools are some of the most opportunity-rich, dynamic schools in the country. Integration is not just good for Black and Latino people, it powerfully shapes the way that white people are in the country. White kids that go to integrated schools are much better citizens. They are much better employees. They are much better supervisors. White kids that go to integrated schools, like myself, a child of court-ordered integration, they view it as one of the most formative and important experiences in their lives. And white kids that go to integrated schools are much less likely to be real estate agents that steer people, bank officials that discriminate. Almost one of the most important things about integration is preventing whites from creating enclaves of wealth and isolation in which they grow more cruel and more indifferent to the society that surrounds them. So these are the things that I'd like to present to you. These are the challenges I have. One of the things to think about here in New Jersey is that you have the power to do this. If you take a look at your racially diverse suburbs, if you take a look at your central cities, you have enough power there. You have a majority of your legislators. And what are you asking this majority of the legislatures to do? To maintain the beneficial integration that's already occurring in most of the suburbs, to maintain it. What we're asking the majority of legislatures to do is to embrace their integration, maintain their integration, and have the wealthier, whiter, more indifferent, predatory, newer suburbs participate in what it is to be a citizen of New Jersey and to abide by the commands of the New Jersey Constitution. So with that, you have a law professor who used to be in politics. Sometimes we talk too long. But I'd like to say I'm honored to be here with you. There's a fabulous opportunity here in your midst to do something. You have the best constitution in the country to do this. You have a magnificent Supreme Court, but thus far you've been stonewalled. No one's listening. Predatory for-profit corporations are making millions of dollars, creating more segregation. The enemies of integration in the beloved society are in force. They are rich, they are powerful, and they are indifferent. You have to participate. Robert Kennedy often said, and in his speech in South Africa once said, that we have to act, that each time a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And those ripples of hope crossing each other can create a wave that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Every one of these communities can create a wave of justice. If they don't act, if these suburban areas don't act to preserve the beloved communities that they've created, then there will be no wave to sweep down the wall of injustice. These suburbs themselves can build, with the central cities and the civil rights movement and the churches and the people of faith, can build a wave that can sweep down the mightiest walls of resistance and oppression. New Jersey is more segregated than the Confederacy. New Jersey should not be more segregated than the Confederacy. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Orfeld. So grateful that Michelle Burris is coming now to moderate this conversation. She is with the Century Foundation, and so delighted to say she is a graduate of Spelman College. Shout out to Spelman Morehouse. Woo woo.
Thank you, Pastor Francois. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for your attendance and participation at our School Segregation Conference here in New Jersey. My name is Michelle Burris. I am a policy fellow at the Century Foundation, and I am honored to be your moderator for today's panel titled, "Why Should We Care? The Damage to the Segregated and the Harm to Us All." At the Century Foundation, a nonprofit policy think tank, we have studied the benefits of integration for decades, including the narrowing of racial achievement gaps, the increased school completion rates for students, and the reductions of racial bias, as Professor Orfeld showed us. In contrast, we have also studied the harmful effects of segregation on students, including depriving students, particularly students of color, of an emancipatory education that ensures all students receive a democratic learning environment. The purpose of this panel discussion is to expand, elaborate, and credential upon Professor Myron Orfeld's presentation. And we could not have asked for more esteemed panelists who are experts in education with personal experiences and hold a view of segregation as a harmful structure of racial and economic subjugation. Each of our panelists will expand on why segregation is harmful to students, the general population, and reflect on Dr. King's quote, "Segregation's purpose is to exploit and oppress the segregated." In the consideration of time, I will provide brief introductions of our panelists. We have been provided with their bios, and we all know, study, and admire their work. We are honored to have Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond, who is the Charles E. DeCummon Professor of Education Emeritus at Stanford University, and the President and CEO of the Learning Policy Institute. Dr. Darling-Hammond is the past president of the American Educational Research Association, AERA, and a recipient of awards including Lifetime Achievement. Second, we are honored to have Mr. Jonathan Kozol, one of the most widely read writers, activists, and educators in the nation. His work has received endless awards, including Shame of the Nation, published in 2005 and a New York Times bestseller, written on the segregated experiences of Black and Brown children, post-Brown versus Board of Education. Third, we are honored to have Professor Erica Wilson, Associate Professor of Law and the Thomas Willis Lambeth Distinguished Chair
and Public Policy at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Law School. Professor Wilson is the author of Monopolizing Whiteness, published this year in the Harvard Law Review. We are honored to have our esteemed panelists virtually today, and I encourage all of us to have a virtual dialogue and to also write questions on the form you have been submitted. My first question is for you, Dr. Darling-Hammond. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
As a well-known expert and advisor to governors and presidents, including President Joe Biden and Governor Phil Murphy, on schools and public education, we know that New Jersey ranks as having some of the best schools in the country. Why should any of us, including Governor Murphy and our state leaders, care about our segregated school districts? Is teacher training, accountability, and other efforts to improve equitable outcomes the path we should be following? Dr. Darling-Hammond.
Thank you so much. Let me first say how great it is to be here with this esteemed panel and with you, Michelle. Note that I have to leave for another meeting at 1:30 PM, so I'm going to try to speak quickly and succinctly and get a chance to listen to my esteemed colleagues here. You know, I'm a big fan, as many people know, of teacher training and, you know, investing in the quality of teachers and so on. But teachers work in a system. I did my student teaching in Camden, New Jersey. And when I went to the book room, you know, I was an English teacher, to get books, there was nothing there. The resource distribution, you know, in New Jersey at that time was so unequal. It was 30 years of litigation trying to get to a school finance system that would be more equitable. It was absolutely allocated on the basis of race. And that's been true across the whole country, that, you know, it's a process of allocating the society's resources that ends up being, contiguous with the way in which we organize people to go to school. So it is not something teachers themselves can change. They can't deal with that resource distribution just by being better trained or being better in the classroom. Teachers do heroic work, but we have to deal with systems. When Brown versus Board of Education was being brought, as Thurgood Marshall and others were trying to think about the legal theory, you know, the theory about school finance reform and that of segregation were going hand in glove, and there were decisions being made about which of those conflated elements, you know, would be the one that would allow the system of segregation to come down. But there's always been inequality associated with segregation, and so we have to look at these systems. Those were constructed through all of the things that Myron talked about earlier. It takes work to create a segregated system. There's been a lot of policy that has designed those segregated systems. And we can even see, despite the benefits of the school finance reform that New Jersey undertook in the early 2000s, which really have helped the state move forward in a variety of ways, how fragile that is. The attacks on that system of equitable funding have been increasing over recent years. And until you get to a place where you're not dividing people by oppressor and oppressed, but in a segregated way, you can't sustain, you know, the equitable allocation of educational resources. Beyond that, of course, our society has rampant bias, and we cannot get to a place as a people where we can see and work with each other in the ways that we should with segregated systems of education. My son now is a social scientist and does studies of racial bias. And the evidence is really clear that when you put people together in workplaces, in schools, in neighborhoods, bias decreases. You can't preserve the level of racism and bias that we have in the society if you begin to desegregate on a system-wide basis. And so that is critically important, both to the way in which children grow up as human beings and the way in which our society operates. I could go on, but I do want to hear from my colleagues as well. So those are just for starters, reasons why we have to take up this issue.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Darling-Hammond. You have launched our conversation on the connections between inequality and segregation, particularly in society. My next question for you, Mr. Kozel. As an author of numerous books and a lifetime of experience on segregation that Dr. Darling-Hammond eloquently stated, with segregated schools in America, we've also seen that you have advocated for children's and teachers in battling the institutions of racial apartheid in America. Please share with us why this segregated structure endures today, Mr. Kozel, and why should we care? What harm does segregated school districts and society cause?
Well, first, thanks very much to Myron and Linda. Both of their presentations hit me very hard. And of course, I agree with them on almost everything they said. I'm often asked this question, why does segregation still persist in the United States? And this may sound simplistic, but in my belief, if I give you the first answer that comes to mind, it's because we are still a deeply, profoundly, barbarously racist society. So who would expect the schools to differ from that pattern? For several decades now, since the early Reagan years, the nation has largely turned its back entirely on the legacy of Kenneth Clark, John Lewis, Ella Baker, who's often forgotten, who was a very important force in organizing people, Thurgood Marshall and Ted Shaw, and so many others. Instead, there's been like a new agenda created. Instead of genuine efforts at desegregation, the focus has shifted to these repeated attempts to render segregated education, quote, more efficient and, quote, more effective, and pumping the scores of children of color by any means available, typically highly punitive approaches. It's what I've come to call perfectible apartheid, Plessy versus Ferguson in postmodern form. And whether this happens in the center cities or whether it happens in the newly diverse but segregated suburbs, the consequence is exactly the same. I'll give you a very quick example. Pick on my own hometown. There's a school in Boston named for Martin Luther King. I remember when it was dedicated to him right after his death in 1968, because I was teaching elementary school a couple of blocks away. And in fact, Dr. King had preached there on the front steps of the school to castigate the segregation of the school just a couple of years before his death. I went back there recently, just before the COVID crisis, and the school today, first of all, it's a dreary 80-year-old school with peeling paint, and in one classroom I visited, there was a gaping water hole in the ceiling. The school is 99.8% Black and Latinx today, including a lot of Haitian children. I asked the principal, I said, this school is named for Martin Luther King. How many white kids do you have? And she thought for a while and then she said, I might have 8 or 10 white children. And the school held 500 kids in all. And here's the irony. Well, I should also add the school is in the 5th bottom percentile academically of all 1,000 elementary and middle schools in Massachusetts. the irony, the mission statement of the school is the following: the Martin Luther King School exemplifies the true meaning of the dream of Dr. King. These ironies, this adulteration of the dream of Dr. King is only too familiar. I'd like to answer your question about why it's harmful, but I'd like to leave room for others. So shall I pause there for a moment?
Yes, and we will come right back to you, Mr. Kozel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kozel elaborated on when we are still have not finished or fulfilled the true legacy of Dr. King. As we have heard, we still have a lot of business to fulfill in regards to having genuine efforts to integrate our schools. Professor Wilson has written eloquently about what happens and the consequences when we do not fulfill these genuine efforts. And we have seen monopolizing whiteness, as she eloquently wrote in her Harvard Law Review. So my questions for you, Professor Wilson. As the author of a powerful article entitled Monopolizing Whiteness, you go beyond the sociological arguments to suggest that keeping Black, brown, and poor children segregated is not only about education, but about opportunity hoarding, economic wealth, and power. Please share your thoughts with us, and do you think your analysis provides more insight into who actually benefits from segregation and how and why this structure endures?
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I was muted, but it wouldn't let me unmute myself. I like to start by just thanking you all for having me here. And I've really agreed with what Professor Darling Hammond and Mr. Kozel and Professor Orfield had to say. And so I will say that a really important dimension to talking about school segregation and segregation more broadly is to really dissect and understand that segregation is about more than a feeling. We've talked a little bit about structural racism and why it persists and what it means. And so in writing Monopolizing Whiteness, I really wanted to highlight the ways in which segregation is not just about, again, a feeling, but there are real tangible costs and benefits to segregation, which I think is part of the reason we might answer, why does it persist? And so I particularly wanted to concentrate on white student segregation, because often when we talk about segregation, we talk about Black and Latinx students being segregated, but there's a corollary to that. When we looked at the map that Professor Orfield put up, we saw the green areas with lots of predominantly white school systems. And I do think that the argument that I make is that given the history of race and what it means and meant to be raised as white, and how that correlates with certain social capital, real capital money, that there are benefits to maintaining white student segregation that occur in the form of monopolization of school funding, given the correlation between tax base and whiteness, a correlation in terms of social capital. Peer-to-peer learning is a huge part of what creates a quality education as well. So when you have white students who are aggregated in districts that are identifiably white, it allows for those districts to continue, the rich get richer. They're able to continue to accumulate the kinds of tangible and intangible resources that go into creating high quality schools and opportunities based on their attendance at high quality schools. And so I think speaking as a lawyer, right, we tend to look at segregation from the school segregation from the perspective of equal protection doctrine, this idea that Black and brown students are being deprived of equal protection of the law. I wanted to look at it from the perspective of how do we regulate a monopoly, because what is happening here, again, given the history of race and the way it correlates with wealth, income, and many other things, white segregation leads to monopolization, opportunity hoarding, resource hoarding, and how do we destabilize monopolies is a different way to look at this, focusing specifically on white students and the benefits to white students that accrue what cost and detriments to non-white students. And so I'll just add one more piece to this, and that is that we ask why schools continue to be segregated. And I do think a big part of it is because white folks, white students want it that way. I mean, their migration patterns and the intentional locating oneself in predominantly white districts is not a coincidence. I do think that's a result, however, of our structures incentivize that, very much incentivize that. That is not to denigrate individuals, but to say that we have set up structures that incentivizes those who can and do have the resources and the benefits that come from segregation to want to segregate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Wilson. You eloquently outlined how segregation continues to perpetuate a system of the have and the have-nots. And I want to continue this conversation on the implications, particularly the economic implications of school segregation, by circling back to you, Dr. Darlin Hammond. My second question to you is, why should we not continue focusing on school choice or charter schools as the answer to school segregation? Do you believe that a business-based model of accountability and standards is an easier route than pursuing school integration?
I don't know what's easier or harder, but what we've seen with the approach to sort of privatization of education is that it hasn't worked to either, overall improve achievement. While there are some charter schools that have done some good work, overall charter schools have been no better, and in many cases more problematic. About a quarter of charters that have started have ended, have gone out of business. They tend to be more segregated than public school districts. And the accountability strategy, as Myron described earlier, has largely punished schools that have high need students and under-resourced school buildings by, threats of sanctions, firing staff, closing the schools, often replacing them with other schools in high need communities that then also have low test scores, because testing without investing has not, been a solution to the challenges that, have been outlined. So I think, there are only marginal improvements that one can make with strategies that don't directly address both the issues of segregation and the issues of resources that have to go hand in glove, to provide the quality and qualities, the ways in which we educate and are educated together of education. So I think we have a track record. We've tried that, it didn't work, and we need to be mindful that we have to address the issues straight up. Policy creates, we often talk about segregation as though it's just like something that just happens. And I think, Erica's point just a moment ago about how there are benefits to segregation that make it worth explicitly pursuing by some folks is something we have to take into account as we also develop policies that explicitly promote integration. We do have examples of successful policies promoting integration. Learning Policy Institute has done a whole series of briefs on desegregation strategies that have not only helped schools be well integrated in a number of parts of the country, but also improved achievement, reduced the opportunity and achievement gaps, and had the benefits of kids becoming more thoughtful, more relationally intelligent, more critically able in their thinking to make sense of the world around them, and more prepared for the world that they're going into. So I think we have to really look to where we've had success and make decisions in that way.
Great, thank you, Dr. Darlin Hammond. From you, we learned that there are successful school integration policies, and it is a duty upon all of us to get school segregation right. We know that we have tried it, and for some students, It has failed for some students, it has worked well, but we have to look at this from a holistic approach in regards to resources, discipline, academic tracking, in order to ensure that all of our students are in integrated environments that is affirming all of them. As we try to get integration right, we also have to be grounded on a historical lens. And so I'm going to ask you, Mr. Kozel, can you please share your thoughts on the shortcomings of the past efforts of school integration, including the insights and expertise of Black leaders? I think we need you to unmute, please, Mr. Kozel.
We okay now?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, good. Well, let me start by kind of trying to connect with what Linda just said. School integration has not failed wherever it's been done in earnest and with real racial sensitivity. This business about that we tried it and it failed, it has become a fashionable lie to which many, I'm sad to say, many of my friends who are sort of weary semi-liberals subscribe to this. But I've seen so many examples of successful programs. Here in the Boston area, for example, 3,200 children ride the bus every day to more than 30 suburbs in a voluntary interdistrict program, which I know very well because I taught in it for 2 years. High school graduation rate for the inner city kids who ride the bus out to these top-rated suburbs every day. The 4-year high school graduation rate is always in the area of 95, 96%. Almost all of them go on to college, and most of them to 4-year colleges of liberal arts and sciences, and then go on into the professions. In addition to the 3,200 kids who are in the program, another 15,000 families have had their children's names on waiting lists in any given year. So people sometimes ask, you know, do Black folks in particular still believe it's worth the ride? At least here in Metro Boston, I think the answer is self-evident. Now, it's not a perfect program. It couldn't be in this society. Racist words are sometimes heard, and other signs of ignorance. But the children would surprise you, and that's the point I wanted to make. Following up on Linda's remark about white parents in the suburbs not wanting to see diversity, many of the children, white, Black, Asian, Latinx, are very good at reaching out across the lines of class and race. And in the case of children of color, of doing it without the loss of pride in their own ethnicity and in their own racial history. Little girl from Roxbury is part of the Black community here, whom I've known for years. She told me honestly of some of the problems. She said that the mother of one of her white classmates, a little girl who's her best friend, didn't invite her to her daughter's birthday party, and that all the white kids were invited. What was the result? The daughter told her mother that if her friend from Roxbury couldn't go to that party, she wouldn't go to it either, to her own birthday party. The mother, faced with this wonderful rebellion, suddenly had a change of heart. Both little girls went to the birthday party. And now in high school, they're closer friends than ever. They have regular weekend pajama parties with each other in each other's homes, back and forth. I don't know, this may sound romantic, but I think that children, if we give them half a chance, can be good teachers to their parents. I'd like to make one other point that I started to make before. People ask, why is segregation harmful? Well, wholly apart from the enormous gap in reading skills, there's another reason why, at least one other reason why I think it's harmful. Once you isolate children of color, it's much, much easier to treat them with a disparate and frankly punitive agenda. Basically, a parallel curriculum, heavy emphasis on training for obedience. I see that everywhere. Skinnerian conditioning, isolation rooms for little kids who make minor misbehaviors. In one business supported semi-corporate school in Boston, that I saw a storage closet in the hallway, and it turned out that was where they put little kids who were giggling too much in class or something like that. No counseling, but put them in the storage closet. Physical beatings, corporal punishment is very common still, not in every state, but in 19 states. And where it is allowed, it's far more common for children of color. Black girls are 4 times as likely to be beaten with a paddle on their rear end as their white counterparts. So the only other point I'd make is that it also damages the rest of us, in my belief, at least by making us strangers to each other, and therefore far more likely to be distrustful of each other when we grow up, and hostile to each other, and starting this, when they're only 6 or 8 years old. People have asked, and I'll end on this point, people have asked, where does racial hatred come from? Where does this terrible tension between the races come from? And I would answer, a simple-minded answer would be from Donald Trump. And he certainly did us no good. But it's not just coming from crackpot white supremacists. It also comes from a system that divides our children according to their skin color from the early years of innocence, denying them the opportunity to learn not only with each other, but from one another in those years of innocence. I know that sounds a bit romantic, but I've seen it happen. And I wish we could organize a national mobilization of decent children to reinforce the drive to do away with this age-old curse of apartheid education in what we still pretend to be a democracy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kozol. And you provided the example of the Boston METCO program. When we have school integration programs that are working well, we can see how we can easily change the hearts and minds of students and pursue real racial harmony. I want to expound on Mr. Kozol's point about school integration, particularly when we're looking at also within school segregation, even in integrated schools, and how we still must also correct those harms. So Professor Wilson, can you briefly share your thoughts on how we still have to follow a path in integration, particularly among discipline disparities? Mr. Kozol spoke about the harsh discipline, particularly that Black girls face being 6 times more harshly disciplined than their white girl peers, even for reasons of rearing their hair. Can you speak about those issues, as well as academic tracking and discrimination that we sometimes see?
Sure. So, I mean, I think And this is one of the arguments that is often levied against attempting to integrate schools, right? That even if we can get the children in the same building, disparities in terms of discipline and academic tracking will occur. Well, I think that's not a reason not to do it, right? I think the better approach is to dismantle those systemic issues such as discipline and tracking. And it can be done, but we have to first be aware of it and acknowledge honestly what has happened. Often we will use attempted race neutral explanations to explain the disparities in discipline, to suggest that African-American children are behaving worse, or that they are not up to par academically. So step one, as far as I'm concerned, is to really dismantle those stock narratives about why these disparities exist. Step two is to really monitor and make sure that we are understanding what's happening in schools. And as Pollyannish as it might seem, education, I mean, the people meting out disparate discipline are humans. They're teachers, they're administrators. So acknowledging that this is happening and showing them a different way, and making sure we have monitoring in place to make sure it doesn't happen is are important tools. The last thing I'll say is that to Mr. Coles's point about why segregation is harmful, I just wanted to give this very personal narrative, because I think it harms, whether we're talking about intra-school tracking or school students in different schools, it does harm us all. I had the experience of having my son, who was Black, attend a school that is predominantly white. And so when I went to pick him up, one of the white students asked me, "Whose nanny are you?" Because his experience was not of seeing parents of color there. And his automatic assumption was that I had to be someone's nanny, right? And so I think that's an important point, because what segregation does, why it's harmful, it's reifying a racial caste system and teaching students at a very early age that there's a particular place based on your skin color. And so I think we can't overlook that, both in terms of thinking about disparities within schools and inter-district segregation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We are at time. I wish I could be on here a lot longer and ask more for this very compelling and thought-provoking conversation. I believe our call to action here today is for each of us to reflect on ourselves, reflect on our communities, look at the demographic data of our schools. And for those who are on the fence of school integration, think about how we must take those steps. It begins with us, with examining demographic data and ensuring that our schools and our kids are going to school integration schools. It starts with us. And as we stand here on the anniversary of a date where students had to integrate schools with military officers next to them, we must continue this fight and this work. We owe that to our schools, we owe that to our community and to our society. And with that, I would like to thank Dr. Darling Hammond. I would like to thank Mr. Kozel and Professor Wilson for your time and expertise. This was a very thought-provoking and fascinating conversation. As a researcher, I value this opportunity to be here with all of you. And I will now pass it to Professor Orfield to narrate our next segment. Thank you all so much.
Well, can everyone hear me? We've had some of the great experts in the United States here with us a few minutes ago. Linda Darling Hammond from Stanford University is one of the great scholars of educational inequality in the nation. Erica Wilson, she talked about her recent article in the Harvard Law Review about the monopoly of whiteness, and they're ready to help us. They're ready to help this move forward. You're in a place right now where history could be made. One of the most important civil rights cases in the country needs support, and you need to participate. And what she's talking about is dismantling that monopoly and making sure that our racially diverse suburbs that are doing all the right things can stay integrated. So with that transition, it's my great privilege to introduce to you Keith Ellison, who is the Attorney General of Minnesota. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota Law School, and we often think that our great graduates are Walter Mondale and Keith Ellison. And Walter Mondale, shortly before he died, said that Keith Ellison is now the modern lion of civil rights in the United States and one of the great leaders of these issues. He's been a very spectacular attorney general pursuing consumer justice, seeking equality in terms of all sorts of financial arrangements. He led a team that prosecuted the murderer of George Floyd and saw him convicted. And so it's my great privilege to introduce Keith Ellison, a great leader on these issues and an eloquent advocate for civil rights. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Orfield. I want to just thank, Professor Wilson for her excellent presentation, which I was able to catch part of. We stand here in 2021 after seeing what is among the most remarkable 18 months in our nation's history. We come out of it, or we go through Trump, and every bit of that administration. Every day you open your phone or open your paper to see the last outrageous thing that he said, often things that are in direct opposition to the goals and the principles of an integrated society. And then COVID hit us, and this pandemic really exposed so many of the endemic underlying problems of our society. So the problems of housing, you can't shelter in place if you can't have shelter. And, education, students having to be home, and now students of color, low-income students receiving the worst end of that very difficult experience. And then, of course, the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent prosecution. George Floyd, a man who was born and raised in North Carolina into a segregated community in Fayetteville, grew up in a community where his opportunities were limited. His mother's opportunities were limited in terms of her education, her life, and sought a better place in the Ninth Ward in Houston, Texas. But what did she find there? She found more segregation. She found segregated schools, limited life chances, schools that didn't have the same level of equipment or instruction as the other students, schools around them. And his way out was the way out that so many African-American kids see as their future, which is in athletics. He saw that as something that he might be able to do to be able to rise above the circumstances that he was born into, which were de facto segregated, which are actually segregated, maybe not by law, but certainly by circumstance, custom, and by structure. And so George Floyd, emerges into this world, and on May 5th, when he found himself having suffered years of sports injuries, he understandably, like so many millions of Americans, used opioids to try to deal with that pain, but he didn't have steady health care, because our country doesn't allow that. We'll give you health care if you can pay. And so he managed that pain as well as he could. And he worked. He worked he used his endowments. He was a guy who was physically large, so he got jobs as a bouncer. But I can tell you that the establishments that he worked at, he was known and had a reputation for being gentle and a peacemaker, and absolutely not willing to impose physical force on people. He talked them through it. And I'm talking about it, places people in Minneapolis know well. And the folks who he worked for loved him and supported him. He also worked at the Harbor Light Salvation Army, where he provided security services there. But it was all piecemeal stuff. Now, what does this have to do with school integration? Well, school integration has everything to do with the segregated nature of our society. We start out with residential segregation, which he experienced. Then that moves into segregated schools, which he experienced. And then limited employment opportunities, which he experienced. And then, of course, how is all of this structural inequality maintained in place? Sadly, it's often law enforcement and our prison and our criminal justice system is how this structural inequality is sort of put together and is maintained in the status quo situation that it's in. So the work that you're doing right now in school integration, I salute, I applaud. I think it's absolutely essential for us to reach the beloved community, to have a society which is as good as its stated ideals. we say liberty and justice for all, but we have more school segregation than we did in the mid-1970s. We've got a long way to go, but I believe that the people assembled in this room are the people who can help change the tune of the nation. Our problems are deeply rooted in the economy and in our political structure. But I think it's important to keep in mind that none of these things have ever changed just through people sitting back and expecting things to get better. They get better because people like you are willing to come to meetings like this, to put your heads together, to share experiences, share strategies, and share a common vision that our society can be better than it is right now. And I pray that you keep your work up and that you are successful. And I want to make sure that I do all I can to be an ally in that fight. The truth is, as Attorney General, we represent institutions and the people of the state of Minnesota. Sometimes that means we get to sue on behalf of the people of the state. Sometimes that means we represent state institutions. But no matter what role we play, our goal has to always be pushing our society toward a more fair, more just society. And there is no better place to start than in our classrooms. And let me just say, I believe in school integration. I'm well aware that there are certain folks who would argue, well, look, what good does it do a kid just to sit next to another kid of different melanin content? And that point misses the point. The point is a segregated school system probably is a school system that's rooted in a segregated neighborhood, segregated employment opportunity, segregated opportunity to own a home, segregated opportunity to get credit, segregated opportunity to own a business. So a segregated school is not just a school where the people got different colors. It's a school where people have different life opportunities and options. It's a school where people's life chances are routed and relegated, generally speaking, based on their skin color. And if you're in the right kind of school where the opportunities are plentiful, that means that you go to higher education, really productive trade, and a life where you are basically just have better opportunities. And if you are in from the other side of that power dynamic, your options are very, very much limited. And I just want to say, the last speaker I found very, very interesting when she, as a parent, is mistaken for being a nanny because people who look like her couldn't possibly have kids in that school. And that's what segregation brings us. That is the natural outgrowth of segregation. People's expectations of who each other are determined by skin color because we don't know each other. We're not in touch with each other. We don't have the same networks, the same outlets, and we don't know people who are different from ourselves. It's why the cause of school integration is a noble and good cause, and a cause which I pray that we will be successful in and we will never give up. The idea that we as Americans live in a multiracial society, which we share, and that we believe is the right way for our future. And so with that, I want to just say thank you for your invitation to be part of the meeting. I look forward when I can join you in the meeting in person. And I just want to congratulate you for your hard work and thank you for the hard work that is in front of us. So with that, I'll yield back.
All right, we've heard a lot this morning and we have been engaged by some of the greatest minds, legal and otherwise, on this particular issue. Y'all feeling all right? All right, good. It's lunchtime and we are engaging in a working lunch today. We're engaging in a working lunch and we want to, as close as possible to engage one another safely, of course. So as we eat, but also have some conversation, reflecting on what we've heard from Professor Orfield, but also what we've heard from the respondents and from the Attorney General of Minnesota. We want to have some conversation and get some feedback, peer-to-peer feedback about what we've heard. So we want to do that in regions. I think one of the easier ways to do that is to think about our state in that triad that we often think about it. Although when I first moved here, people told me Central Jersey didn't exist. It is a thing, and we're going to treat it like it's a thing today as well. So if you are from North Jersey, will you just raise your hand? Okay, look around and North Jersey folk, look and see where you are, see if you can make some intentions as we exit. Be intentional about connecting with one or two other persons who have identified your region. Central Jersey, are you here? All right, I see Central Jersey here. Good, good, good. See each other, look around, observe, assess, survey where your folk are. All right. Also do that very same thing. South Jersey, are you here? All right, we are here. We are here. Let's look at one another so that we can convene during our lunch experience. This is what I want us to do. So remember those faces, remember those hands. What we're going to do is, as you know, we said that there is an action connected to our participation, our presence here today. Really, when we leave here, we want you making commitments about how you will engage your lawmakers between now and Election Day, between now and November 2nd. But we have an opportunity today to engage our electeds. Here we have, you'll find in the comment area once we vacate this room that there is a contact sheet of some key legislators. And what we want you to do is we want you to email the link for this experience. I think Paul is making that available to everyone who has registered the Zoom link. Yeah, he's going to make that Zoom link available to us. So you'll receive the Zoom link, and we want you to email that with a robust encouragement to your elected official to be on the Zoom at 1:10. Is that right, Paul? 1:10? You'll only get it if you've registered. You'll only get it if you register. So if you have not registered, I guess you can just come see me. If you have not registered, you can come see me and we'll walk you through that process of online registration. But please look for this form. If you just want to come grab this form from me, this contact sheet from me before you leave, or if you plan on leaving out more slowly than others, you can grab that from me. But we want everyone in the room today to send that link to an elected. We've done that ourselves, but we want you to do it as well. And if you don't, these are key electeds. If you don't see your elected on this sheet, just send it to President Sweeney. I think that's a good idea. If you don't see him, if you don't see your elected on this sheet, let's just send it to President Sweeney, who's made some commitments to us that we really, really want him to fulfill. You'll also see this planning sheet. There's a planning sheet that you can use as you're gathering together to figure out what your next steps are as a region, what your next steps are as a legislative district. We're seeing we are a leader for coalition, a leader for movement, and so you are a part of the leadership in your area for this campaign, for this coalition.
So between 1:40 and 2 is what we send the Zoom link to pop on between 1:40 and 2.
So, but we want them to hear the.
We do.
Yeah, so 1 o'clock.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, 1 o'clock. Let's have them on. We're gonna encourage our electeds to be on at no later than 1:10, so that they can hear us lay out the agenda, the remedy, the makings of the remedy, and then we want to get some feedback from them in that last portion of that hour. So they'll be with us between 1 and 2. So encourage them to be with us between 1 and 2, making sure that they're on no later than 1:10. Are there any particular ways we're dismissing? Yes, Ms. Sumter is here. We're so grateful for her leadership, always. But we are giving a healthy nudge to our lawmakers to be with us for that 1 to 2 slot of our time together. Are there any particular instructions on how they get lunch?
It's out there. I haven't been out there, but I think it's self-explanatory. When you get out, it's a boxed lunch. bring it in here, and then we gotta be back in here by 12:30 for Congressman Bonnie Watson.
Good. So you heard those instructions from the sideline. So make sure that you, as you exit, we exit safely. We exit in ways that are civil, obviously, and that we do not bring food back into the auditorium per the rules of the college, and that we are wearing our mask when we're not eating. I believe we can obviously we can take our masks down a bit while we eat and while we drink, but we need to be back in the room at 12:30 for Representative Coleman, so that we can get her call to action as we move forward, and we have some awards we want to give out. So have a great lunch.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon. I hope you all had a nurturing lunch experience, and I hope that the conversation was just as nourishing, hopefully more nourishing than the food, as we continue to push this movement forward. I'm so excited as we reconvene today to introduce Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman. Obviously, she needs no introduction. She is the kind of history maker that books are written about. And so we'll just let her do what she does and inspire us forward as she does every single day. I don't know a lot of people who are fighting for us in Washington, but she is leading that charge and leading that group. So Representative Watson Coleman, we're with you.
Thank you. I want to take my few minutes here to say hello to everyone and to thank you for this opportunity, and to particularly call out Paul Scully, because he and I have been in the trenches for a very long time. And it's always about making America one and the same for everyone. And schools and the implication of segregation in schools is a very important part of this conversation. You know, it's been 67 years since Brown v. Board of Education, and it's been 64 years since Little Rock. And yet in 2021, we in New Jersey, and indeed across the country, are experiencing greater segregation of our schools and greater disparities in the outcomes and the input that those schools and those children get. And we have got to put a stop to it. Now, there are a lot of reasons why this has happened, not the least of which is a concentration of poverty, not the least of which has been the redlining policies, not the least of which has been the funding, the under-resourcing of communities where you have large swaths of people of color and of lower socioeconomic status. And housing is a particularly big issue here. I remember being back in Jersey and working on issues of access to decent, affordable housing was a primary concern of ours. Not that it should be clustered in any one place, but there should be choice in housing as well. And you know, there's a movement back towards cities now. And so there's a gentrification that is taking place that we got to pay attention to, because we can't displace people again. But when we do create greater housing opportunities in our vibrant cities, we want those families that are moving there to put their children in the schools that are there. And so that presents a real challenge for a state like New Jersey. First of all, we're a small landmass. We've got over 530 some municipalities and over 600 school districts. In my humble opinion, that has always been excessive. And there's always been something that we needed to deal with, to address. There's been some consolidations, but not nearly enough. But even in addition to just consolidating districts, we need to look at How do we create opportunities and choice in public realms and magnet schools of excellence located in places that people from all over that particular county would want to send their children? In my dream world, you would have a choice within your county to go to any school in that county. And there would be the placement of magnet schools of scholarship, AP experiences located in places like some of our vibrant urban cities, that parents who want their children to have that AP experience in science or math or STEM or the arts, whatever, they would have no problems going to a school located in our cities, because they would know that the resources are there, the support is there, and that the excellence of education is there. I commend our teachers and our administrators and all of our staff and in all of our schools, particularly those who've had to fight their way through this pandemic and ensure that our children in the poorer school districts have had access to broadband, have had access to laptops, and have been coached and taught all through that experience. Y'all are on the front lines. I am particularly appreciative of this organization from the beginning when we fought for fair housing in New Jersey to now where we're looking at issues of school segregation. If we want something to change, then we have to develop our plan, back our plan, plan our work, and then work that plan. You're so vital to that important undertaking. Don't get discouraged. Do not think that change cannot happen. It is happening every day around us. We want good change. We want transformative change. Down here in Washington, D.C., we're fighting hard to make sure that there's a two-track approach to the infrastructure bills. Of course, we need bricks and mortar infrastructure bill, but equally important is that we need to be able to lift up the infrastructure, the human infrastructure, from the baby to the elderly, to the working family, to the family that needs assistance. There's so much that has to be done. You all are instrumental in getting those things done because you communicate with people in your communities and in your organizations. Thank you, and God bless you. God bless you for the work that you do. If I am not mistaken, I now can sort of transition into something that I find a real blessing to be able to do today, and that is to talk to you about tonight's awards. In 2014, I was honored to be named the first recipient of the Shirley Chisholm Breakthrough Leader Award. And as I'm sure she is for many of you, she was certainly one of my heroes. She was the first Black woman to serve in Congress and paved the way for me as New Jersey's first, but also for my friend Ayanna Presley, the first Black woman to represent Massachusetts, who occupies Shirley Chisholm's office in Washington. Our first recipient this evening is a good and long-time friend of mine. Marie Bliston is a teacher, a labor leader, and a power broker. She has inspired us with her leadership at the NJEA. She has been steadfast in her commitment and powerful contributions to the cause of racial justice, educational and economic opportunity and parity for all the children and the families in New Jersey. She does it with grace and she does it with conviction. She's an authentic leader, and it is my pleasure to be able to present this award to her. So I get to do it twice. Absolutely, give her a resounding applause. This is another recipient with whom I have a very long and dear relationship. Assemblywoman Shavonda Sumter. She is the chair of the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus. Since she came to the Assembly, she has exemplified excellence in leadership and commitment and hard work. Wherever you need her, she will be. for her powerful work representing the people of the 35th Legislative District and her breakthrough role as the chair of the New Jersey Legislative Black Caucus, and for advancing the causes of social justice and racial justice and civil rights and equal opportunity and educational opportunities, and for her brilliant leadership. On behalf of all of our New Jersey families, we salute you as well, Assemblywoman. That's a powerful picture, everybody. Congratulations to my sisters, both of you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. It's an honor and it's a privilege to stand on this stage next to you, whether we are there physically or virtually. Thank you so very much for the work that you're continuing to do in Washington, D.C. Finally, we have some voices of reason with you leading the charge down there. Thank you. And I'm equally as privileged to stand on this stage next to Assemblywoman Shavonda Sumter. I have known Shavonda for quite some time, probably during my whole time at NJEA, and she has been a powerhouse. She has been a true friend to public education and our employees, and she has been a champion for justice and for equity, not equal, but for equity for our children. You said it long before others did, and I'm honored to share this award and this stage with you. And thank you to Paul Scully, Reverend Francois, and Reverend Clayton for co-hosting this event. And thank all of you for supporting it. You know, school desegregation it's long been ignored. It's been denied. It's been fought against. It's been fought for. And those types of things will continue unless we heed the words and advice of the previous speakers, which is to commit to what we're going to do at 3:01 p.m. today when this conference ends. That we will commit to not only the what, it's clear that desegregation is wrong, but also the how of what needs to be done. When I look back on, and I'm a teacher by trade, you know that, that is what I do for a living, and what I still have done during my years being the privileged officer at NJEA, we look to others. And Shirley Chisholm has been one of the people who was a true trailblazer. In fact, a friend of mine found a pin when she was running for president of the United States, and the pin says unbought, unbossed, which is, I think, the title of her autobiography. Shirley Chisholm knew the what of what needed to be done, but she also knew the how of what needed to be done. And when I looked at other trailblazers like Gladys Hedgepeth and Bernice Williams, two mothers, ordinary citizens in the city of Trenton in 1944, where they built a brand new public school in their neighborhood. And they then found out that their own children could not attend that school because it was for whites only. Well, Gladys and Bernice were outraged and they filed a suit. It wound up in the New Jersey Supreme Court and they won. They won. And that case of those two trailblazers set the stage for some monumental, historical, and very significant legislation in the state of New Jersey and nationally. You see, it was that case in 1944 that said desegregation was not going to occur in New Jersey, that laid the groundwork for Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. But it also laid the groundwork for policy and legislation in this state against segregation and against discrimination, including the 1947 Constitution in the state of New Jersey, guaranteeing thorough and efficient public education.
but it also laid the groundwork for another trailblazer, Senator Winona Lippman, the first African-American woman who was elected a senator in the state of New Jersey in 1971. Senator Lippman was also a trailblazer in a lot of areas. She guaranteed and forced the legislation that demanded the public schools stop segregation and work affirmatively for equal opportunity for all students. Little known fact about Senator Lippman, probably Shavonda, you know this, she had a nickname of Steel Magnolia. Another little tidbit about her time as senator in the state of New Jersey, when she was elected, there were no restroom facilities for ladies. And so when she wanted to use the facility, she had to have a state trooper, male, of course, accompany her and to keep watch at the door. This is just conjecture on my part, but I think that the nickname Steel Magnolia might have had something to do with the consequence of the situation that she found herself in. And she knew even then that she was going to have others with a coalition address the status quo. Other trailblazers like ELC in 1981, who filed the lawsuit Abbott versus Burke. Burke being the Commissioner of Education. Abbott was the name of a student in Camden. That lawsuit was about equity in school funding. That lawsuit is 30 plus years old. It keeps going back because it keeps getting talked about, fought against, and fought for. I think they're up to 20, if I'm not mistaken. But Lucy Abbott was the mother of the Raymond Abbott, the student in that lawsuit. Lucy Abbott was also a teacher, as was Senator Lippman, by the way. There is a little common thread there. Shavonda, it's not too late. We're going to recruit you also to be a teacher. You teach every day along with Congresswoman. And that particular lawsuit, as you well know, has named New Jersey as having the most fair, equitable funding. Look, my point is that it's not going to take just one of us. It takes all of us, and it takes us in a coalition. And so I humbly accept this award on behalf of our many NJEA members who do this work every day, who have advocated and demanded full school funding, who have demanded and expanded pre-K, who have expanded better access and more access for our students in college, who have demanded and expected competitive compensation so that we can keep a quality workforce, that we have advocated for a diverse workforce, that we have advocated and pushed for the Amistad curriculum to be done in the spirit in which it was legislated. Thank you, Assemblywoman Sumter, for your help in getting the Amistad Award put forth. I close with a book that I just finished. Don Lemon is a political analyst on CNN, and he wrote a book called This is the Fire, What I Say to My Friends About Racism. I literally just finished the book this week, and I think thinking about this conference and thinking about what we need to do, I quote him. In the book, he talks about in 2008, Oprah Winfrey told Barack Obama that she had heard him speak. And she said to him, I believe you are the one. And according to Don Lemon, Barack Obama replied, I am one of the ones. In one of the chapters at the end, Don Lemon, the chapter's called How Change Happens. He asked 3 times about racism. How does this end? How does this end? How does this end? But then he answers his own question. And he says, and I quote, people, there is no end. The answer is a new beginning. Imagine the bridges we build when we ourselves become the conduit between what was and what can be. I look forward to what can be and working with Building One and all of you in the new beginning. Thank you.
And come on up. I'm just trying to fix this. Congresswoman had to jump off, and that's why I'm blaming her. for this getting knocked off. And then, where's the clicker? Do I have a clicker? Here it is.
Okay, great.
I'm just gonna flip this so we get to where we're supposed to be. Don't worry about it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you to my co-honoree and Ms. Marie Bliston with a historical lesson and a true educator indeed. Let's give her another round of applause. I want to thank Paul for coming into my life unexpectedly during the pandemic. So thank you. Gave me a couple more assignments to do with Reverend Francois and of course my pastor, Reverend Kenneth Clayton, to my family at Kane University. You can let Dr. Repollet know I'll be looking for a discount for going back to school for a teacher certification. On those credits, please take that message back. To the Speaker of the General Assembly, Craig Coughlin, who couldn't be here, but was happy to sponsor a portion of this event, and to Comcast as well. I want to say thank you. When I sent out the message, they gladly supported once they saw that Marie Bliston was being honored, myself, and of course, seeing Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman's name on anything sort of just galvanizes us all, right? I love that woman, and I have the honor to serve in the assembly with her. She was indeed a mentor and a friend. So the famous quote for Shirley Chisholm is, if they do not give you a seat at the table, you do what? Bring a folding chair. So I wear my chair pin whenever I have the opportunity to at least have her name somewhere in the presence of the work that I'm doing. It's important to stay encouraged because this work is hard. As I listen, thank you, amen, always needed. Keep me encouraged. As I listened to Marie go through the history of the battles that we thought were won, the history of the battles that we thought were won, and we still sit here today talking about the segregation of schools in New Jersey in 2021. The inequities that we face. I hail from the city of Patterson, born and raised there. In the midst of a pandemic, we saw the disparities and a technology divide and our teachers not having equipment, and we had to pivot. We had to pivot on our heels for safety. And then we had to make sure that the learning divide was not exacerbated by not having access to devices. We scrambled because as a people, the thing I love about Patterson and New Jersey is we have the tenacity to figure it out and get it done. But should it be that hard? Should we have to work that hard when other school districts have the equipment and the tools that they needed and was ready to step into this space for safety during a pandemic? A couple of weeks ago, we were hit with Hurricane Ida. The news weather folks are the only ones who can be wrong. They can be wrong. We did not expect in the city of Patterson for the flood and the amount of water that came through our communities. 2 schools are still closed today. And I want to give you a visual. School to School 20, which Reverend Clayton actually graduated from many years ago. And 7-year-old has the backpack on, which is bigger than him. He's ready to walk the 2 blocks to go to school because it's supposed to be the first week of school. And the school is closed with a notice taped on the door, closed due to Hurricane Ida. Today is September 24th and it's still not open. And they're learning remotely. But you know the excitement of that first day of school. You know the need. Mental health is my passion for the socialization that comes with congregating at a school, learning the excitement, even with masks, and being together with your peers. We have 2 schools that are still not open. So one of the things I want to leverage here today, and I want you to join myself and the Legislative Black Caucus, and I always believe in call to action, and you could thank the NAACP for that. It's funding the School Development Authority so we can build new schools. Will you all join me in that fight? It's a travesty. It's a travesty that we are not screaming from the rooftops that we are not building new schools. It is necessary. Some of our schoolhouses are over 100 years old. The health, safety, and wellness, they have outlived their use. So it's up to us as this new generation to put thought to paper so that we can turn this idea into a real experience of a place just like this space we're in right now, where our students can learn safely, where our teachers can teach using technology. It's long overdue. And together, I know that we can do this, because then not only will New Jersey be #1 for public education on that elementary and middle school level, but we can send them to college prepared. We can send them to college prepared and they'll be excited about learning. But we have to create those environments. And that's what I'm hopeful that we leave here today, in addition to fighting the fight on the legal grounds, but making sure that we put our money and our resources into building these new schoolhouses for this next generation of students and teachers to have a safe place to teach, a safe place to learn, and then we have a state that will continue to thrive. So thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for the award.
We're grateful for both of these honorees for their tireless work that they have committed to our state and to people who are most vulnerable and unprotected. So can we just give both of them a hand again in our excitement and affirmation for what they do. Assemblywoman Sumter invited us in her full authority, and we appreciate that, to join her in a necessary issue. And we are grateful that we can present a set of policy proposals that we know that our Assemblywoman, our leader, will be able to get behind as well. We have said over and over again that we are here today because our state is living out of compliance with its own constitution. That it is nothing, that when you don't live up to your constitution is nothing more than words on a page. And we refuse to live in a state with as much wealth as this state has, and a state that is as blue and progressive as this state is, to allow it to continue to live unaligned with the words that it penned on paper. And so school segregation, as we are able to say here as faith leaders, we say school segregation is sin. It is state-sponsored sin. It is institutional iniquity. It is structural sin that we believe as the people of this state that we can remove from the soul of this state. And so we believe that even though now that we see this adulteration of Brown v. Board, that we can finally put an end. We can finally dig the grave and bury the coffin of the Plessy Doctrine through a set of proposals that we offer this framework to you for what a remedy would look like. And I think it is important to say, as I head toward there, that COVID has only upheld and expanded racial isolation and powerlessness. When we're talking about integration, again, this is not simply about diversity and not simply about cosmetic diversity. This is about opportunity, and it is about power building for students and for families and for communities. And so as we think through this, we know that it is our time to make New Jersey live up to what it says it is on paper. First, this proposal, this remedy must involve everyone. All districts bear some responsibility and have a role to play. So that means we have to shut all the doors to flight. We have to close the escape hatch of white flight. Small scale pilot projects, that will not work this time. We must engage the whole region, and we must engage every region. We must implement this strategy statewide. It must involve all of us. Secondly, we must set achievable, fair goals of inclusion and integration. The state's aim should be to support and incentivize and push all districts, all schools, all faculty, all classrooms to better reflect the diversity of the regions and the state. You can see here, just in that image alone, you can see again what Myron offered us, or what Attorney Orfield offered us earlier, just a picture, some numbers of what our state looks like. So I want you to get a good look at that again as we move forward. But we have to have goals here that make sure that it reflects the diversity of all the regions and all the entirety of the state. Next slide. So you're going to see some maps, you're going to re-see some maps of particularly four metropolitan areas in our state that actually do offer us some hope that integration is possible in spite of people telling us that it's not, in spite of people telling us that it's natural. We can see that it is possible. Next. Here we have the Trenton area. We have the area pretty much where we are now. And you can see there are 3 places in the Trenton area that show us that integration that matches the region and integration that aligns with the state numbers are possible. You can see right there in Lawrence Township, Hamilton Township, and East Windsor. These are examples that show us that integration is possible. You can look at Atlantic County, Atlantic City area. There are at least two places in Atlantic City, that's my area, where you can see that these are potential models to show us that integration is possible. You can look at Greater Egg Harbor, or you can look at Egg Harbor Township. We can move on to the Camden area, right? Look at Camden. You can see that there are 3 areas in Camden. You see the deep concentration in the central city, but you see in the suburbs opportunities in places there that show us that integration is not some pipe dream, but it is actually happening. Remember I said earlier, incentivizing where it is happening, naming and honoring that it is happening even in our metropolitan areas. And then we move to the Newark area, which Attorney Orfield told us is one of the most segregated places in the nation, not just the state, but one of the most segregated places in the nation. And you can see in that area, 5 examples that speak to the possibilities of integration. Integration is possible, but it's going to take the entire region and it's going to take the entire state. Thirdly, is that our goals must be based on opportunity as well as race. Remember I said, this is not just about diversity, it's about opportunity and it's about power building for the most vulnerable. Opportunity is defined by those social and economic factors such as income, wealth, quality schools, jobs, and tax base. You'll see in a moment, again, a reprise of what Attorney Orfield showed us in terms of where opportunity exists. Those green areas and those blue areas are where you have the highest opportunity. And unfortunately, the majority of the state, the majority of the school districts in the state are perpetuating, are upholding medium to minimum opportunity. But there are districts, as we know, that I just outlined a moment ago that show us that there is opportunity even around these central areas that show us that it is possible. Fourth, it has to have a combined approach. There's no silver bullet to this. There's no one law that fixes all, that we have to have a combined approach to this. I'll run these down and then I'll talk just a moment about how some of this can work. We have to strengthen school funding formula. We have to reform the intra-district choice program. We have to have pro-integration magnet and county school programs. We have to have district and classroom level strategies and best practices. We need to use our fair housing goals and obligations to push for education integration. We have a new school consolidation bill that is really fresh, that needs to be strengthened, that needs to be tightened, and we can do that. And we must also strengthen the civil rights capacity of the Department of Education. The school funding formula, while it is good, and we know it is good, it can do more. State aid should prioritize and advantage diverse districts. Funding should support strategies that foster inclusion within districts, schools, and classrooms. High poverty districts should not be penalized. We know they did not create themselves. Right? Funding should only support high opportunity districts as they diversify. Just because they are high opportunity districts does not mean they should be automatically rewarded. They need to also help in shouldering the burden that poverty school districts did not create. The interdistrict public school choice. This program in its current form does not promote integration, but it can if it is reformed. Make it mandatory for high opportunity districts that fall short of regional integration goals. Spaces in districts can be prioritized for students from the most segregated and high poverty districts. We have to use that program to advance integration. Our county school system and magnet schools, county technical trade and vocational schools, they serve so many of our regions, but they don't always have the kind of integrative goals that we need. We're saying that they should require regional goals for economic and racial balance. They should enact legislation. We must enact legislation to create and support pro-integration regional magnet schools in urban areas. And there must be legislation that requires charters to also meet the regional integration goals. Reform the school consolidation bill. Right now, we have a school consolidation bill that is primarily about saving money, but our Constitution doesn't obligate us to save money. Sounds like a good idea, but our Constitution actually mandates there's an affirmative obligation for integration. So we must amend it, even though it's fresh. We have to prohibit withdrawal, separation, and dissolution as a part of any proposed consolidation bill. Majority white schools should not be able to just walk away from majority non-white schools, and we need a bill that prevents that. It must also require an affirmative obligation to create racially and socioeconomically integrated districts. Fair housing is a part of our answer as well. We must include fair housing in goals for school and classroom integration. We have to strengthen the Fair Housing Act to better promote inclusion in our schools. Affluent districts who think that they're too far flung to integrate can be required to deepen their affordable housing obligation. And in order to make this happen and to ensure that it's enforceable, we have to do something about the Department of Education itself. We must strengthen the civil rights capacity there. We can't do this without a strong Department of Education, particularly a civil rights division that's able to do this. So one, enact legislation to strengthen the Department of Education civil rights capacity and enforcement so it is charged with and capable of carrying out our desegregation goals. And DOE must have the capacity to conduct opportunity analyses to develop inclusion goals for each district across the state. Now, we know that there's some caveats to this, right? We have to avoid short-term quick fixes, right? We have to be clear that those stopgap experiences that we've used in the past as Band-Aids will not work. We must also not blame the victim. These deeply concentrated school districts did not create themselves. Laws did that. Policies did that. Divestment did that. So we cannot blame these underserved, we cannot blame these vulnerable districts for where they are, right? We are also very clear that not all suburban and urban districts are the same. That's why we think deeply about regional areas. We have to think deeply about how each regional area works. So we're clear that there's no cookie cutter approach to this across the state. And we know that our number one goal is to do no harm. County consolidation, it will not capture the kind of diversity that we need, and nor will it avoid the flight that continues to happen. We also know that simply removing district boundaries will not be enough to stop the flight. We know that magnet and vocational schools, that they will not create the answer itself, but we have to ensure that they don't create more layers of exclusivity and inclusion. And we must know that magnet schools as well as charters must meet the meaningful goals, that they must too contribute. Our magnet schools and our charter schools must contribute to these goals of integration, reflecting the kind of diversity that exists across the regions. No, school integration is not going to fix all of the problems. We know that it is not a substitute for ending residential segregation, economic inequality, or racial discrimination, but it is a part of fixing the problem. It is a part of us getting something done. And so this, what we've shared with you today, these are the beginnings of our framework. This is a starting point for advancing a policy agenda that we know we can move on in the next legislative session. We've received some commitments from legislators. We've received glorious support from our Assembly Speaker. We've had intense conversations with our Senate President, and we know that in this next legislative session that we have the capacity to promote and sustain racial and economic opportunity through these particular proposals that we've lifted today.
We have, in the church tradition, we have heard a rousing speech or sermon as such. We respond by saying amen. You have done that with your hand claps. We're not gonna pass the basket. But what we've done in several of our calls, when we've shared this similar information, if not the same information, we took on the responsibility of speaking to our Assembly people, the people from NACP and other organizations. We have to really coalesce together and make this happen. What Willie has shared and laid out for us in terms of blueprint and plan, it has to be worked now. I think it was someone just said that at 3:01 is when our real work begins. We're spending time here listening and learning. At 3:01, we need to go to work and continue to make this a reality. So our presence and our movement beyond today will determine how much is will happen, because we have people who will hear us if we speak the same voice, speak with the same voice, sing the same song, and push the same button to make sure that they do their work on our behalf and for our children.
Can we get a verbal amen? I love it. We are grateful that this is a diverse coalition, and we are pastors, community leaders, educators, parents, but we also have academics, experts, as you've seen with Attorney Orfield today, and also with Michelle, who led us so powerfully in our last panel, that I am grateful to bring Professor Wilson up to the platform as we have another conversation, particularly about these legislative proposals and our way forward. So, Professor.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I don't have to use my professor voice then. Good. All right, so we have a lot of greatness in the room. We have a lot of powerful people and a lot of inspirational people, and that means you're in that group. So what I want you to think about is what you've heard today and how to take this and use it. So at 3:01, all this greatness in this room needs to be transformed into something really powerful. Okay, so Reverends Clayton and Francois have set us on a course, and now we have to follow it. This morning, Attorney Orfield and his brother, my good friend, have illustrated for us that our state is filled with a lot of segregated school systems. And I would concur on this and say that our state is tied to a lot of different segregated housing practices, residential policies, and various school politics which support segregated schools. But there are different types of segregated schools in New Jersey. There's not just one type. And there are different types of segregated schools in different parts of the state. We need to understand where those school districts are, what types of segregated schools there are, and we need to call them out and address them. I think Erica Wilson's Research also highlights the ideas and concepts of containment and hoarding of resources. Wealthy and all-white districts have designed game plans to limit opportunities for non-white students and for some poor white students as well. I would argue that in many respects, no amount of money can overcome some aspects of monopolizing behavior. We have to call this out as well. So I think that our honorees today are our roadmap. They have told us about the history of the state of New Jersey and the brave people in New Jersey who have stood up and fought. They are telling us who we can look to, and that is ourselves. And I'm charging everyone in this room with that obligation. We as a group and as individuals must stand up and fight to make a difference in the state of New Jersey, not just for ourselves, but for the next generations. And so now I'm going to be joined with a group of experts who will help us. And we are going to answer several questions. One is, why should we all engage in this fight? How can we win? And why should we win? And so I'm going to ask the experts to join me. So I'm going to call up my one expert who's in the room, Paul Jaworski, come on up. And then I have also John Britton, who's going to be there with me as well. So I'm going to ask you both some questions. So Paul, I'm going to start with you. You have researched and written extensively about segregation, and you've written the architecture of segregation and its disastrous consequences for communities for democracy. What is your reaction to the proposal that you just heard?
Well, I think the proposal is fantastic. And one of the most important things about it, I think, to be illustrated by talking about a little suburb that you've all heard of, and I won't say the name yet. But in St. Louis, there are 400 suburbs around the city. Okay, it's on now? No, I'm sorry. Most of them are pretty, or at least they used to be pretty white and low poverty. And there was one, Ferguson, that was in 1990, as recently as 1990, was mostly white and very low poverty. But it became one place where people could move, where there was some affordable housing. And so it got overwhelmed. And I think Professor Orfield mentioned this morning about how some districts can be overwhelmed because the other 399 suburbs in the St. Louis metropolitan area weren't doing their part to provide affordable housing. So that one place couldn't bear the brunt of the entire population trying to live there. And you know what happened? We had those the riots, and we had the whole situation with Ferguson. And that's, really leads me to what this proposal says, which is that you have to close the escape hatches, right? When we passed the Fair Housing Act, it said you couldn't have discrimination at the point of sale. So what happened? Why didn't it work? Why didn't it do more to reduce segregation? Well, part of what happened was people moved to the suburbs and used exclusionary zoning to make sure that there wouldn't be any discrimination at the point of sale because most minority families could not afford to even make a bid, right? If they can't get there and they can't afford to make a bid, you don't have to worry about discrimination at the point of sale. So that led to suburban white flight. So by saying that this needs to be done statewide and that every community has an obligation to be a part of this, I think that's extremely important. And I also feel like the question that comes up of, well, isn't this really a neighborhoods problem? Shouldn't we really work on the neighborhoods? The point is that one of the big motivations for people to do those escape moves was because they wanted to have all white schools for their kids. And you can't just allow that to be rewarded. That has to be, and if you can't escape in that way to an all-white school district by moving to an all-white community, then there's less incentive to worry about moving to an all-white community, right? These two things work together. So by saying that we have to have an integrated strategy, that is an essential part of this legislation actually being able to be successful as it's implemented. And just one other Well, no, I think I'll stop there and we can come back.
Okay, I'll come back to you.
All right.
Professor Britton, how are you?
Good afternoon.
Good. I have a question for you too. You've worked many years as a civil rights attorney, challenging and succeeding in combating discrimination and segregation. What advice would you offer us in terms of the proposal that we've just heard?
I offer the advice in this pandemic of inequality and lost opportunity in both education and housing, which are quite linked together because housing segregation is the #1 cause of school segregation. And so you need to attack both in order to particularly achieve educational equality. I'm also delighted to see many of my colleagues there today, such as Myron and Gary Orfield. I saw that Linda Darling-Hammond was speaking. And whenever Paul Scully calls me, I come. And so I have just heard Pastor Francois lay out a plan. And that satisfies my first element, that you must have a plan for school diversity and integration and equality before any litigation ends, hopefully with a successful victory for the plaintiffs in the suit in proving that New Jersey is legally segregated and there must be a remedy. So yes, plan the remedy now. Don't wait for the end of the court case. Use the legislation to pass something that will promote school integration. The second thing you need is the very format which exists today at this conference, and that is a movement, an organization, a community activists and advocates for this. No school litigation, even when it won in the court, was ever successful without a movement of the people to implement the remedy. So walk out today with this gathering and with a commitment to continue to fight for school equality in New Jersey.
Thank you. I'm going to ask both of you a question, which I think is really important. What are the consequences if we don't do anything? I'm going to start with you, Paul.
Well, I think we have so much good research at this point on the consequences of segregation. We look at places where segregation declined versus places where it didn't. And you compare that, you see that disparities in health between African Americans and whites diminished in those places that reduced segregation. Disparities in income diminished. We could look at health issues, blood pressure, diabetes, infant mortality. All of these things are related to racial segregation. There's also the fantastic work that Raj Chetty has done at Harvard using almost an experimental design that shows that kids who spend additional years in very high poverty neighborhoods ended up making much less money over the course of their lives, much less likely to get married, more likely to live in a poor neighborhood than they grew up, and more likely to be incarcerated. I mean, the costs are tremendous to continuing the kind of absolutely immoral set of policies that we have in place today. And, that is, we've been bearing the cost for a while now. You see the conflicts that we have and the racial and the incredibly angry politics that we have. All of that is coming from the fact that we have this segregation and people are fighting to preserve their advantage if they live in all white neighborhoods. And it's a destructive force in our society. So if we want to be a prosperous society in the long run, if we want all to maximize the potential of our children to participate in the economy and to make us all better off by being productive citizens, then we need to break down segregation by race. And this question of, again, schools versus neighborhoods. The thing about that is that if you started doing everything right about neighborhoods today, it would take 20 or 30 years really to make a substantial change because the housing market turns over more slowly. And people, you have to wait for people to make individual decisions to move and form households and so forth. Whereas schools, we have a lot of power. We have a lot of power to say, you know, this is where the kids are going to go to school, and we can change it from one year to the next pretty substantially if we have a good plan. And if that plan, you know, there has to be a political support and buy-in on some scale to make that work. Or you'll have, you know, kind of electoral rebellion that we saw in 2016 and that we've seen in certain states at different times. So I think the costs of leaving it the way it is are horrendous, and we just have to move forward. This has to work. We can show the rest of the country that this can work if we can do it here in New Jersey.
John, same question. John, so what are the consequences if we don't do anything?
I think the consequences of the maintenance of segregation, indeed apartheid in the United States, has numerous social, economic, and political consequences. We must fight for diversity, for inclusion, for equity, and for access. Those includes intersectionality of various groups who can profit from higher educational achievement. Education is the key to social upward mobility. This society owes an obligation to bring everybody up and to give them a fair chance in the society. Therefore, I've dedicated my life for 52 years, like Thurgood Marshall, in advocating for school integration and school diversity because it leads to greater social and political and economic advantage.
Thank you. So how would you both help this cause?
Well, I'm the director of the Center for Urban Research and Education, and to the extent that I can provide information, data, maps, and so forth that would help the cause, and I can get my center to do that. And I've got students that are actually definitely would be very interested in being a part of this effort, and I will be a part of the effort to help you get it passed.
Okay, thank you. John, how would you help the cause?
I will help the cause in what I think is the key to the ultimate success. The key legally and educationally to the success is the development of a school assignment plan. And it's the assignment plan that determines where children go to school and what education do they get at the school. The assignment plan also must be legal, or otherwise those who are against school integration will sue the state and local educational districts as they've done in the past. Therefore, we must use the components that will withstand any legal test in order to maintain the goal of creating an equitable and educationally sound integrated education for all children. I will continue to work with the One Nation in New Jersey and the effort to build upon this kind of coalition in order to achieve educational equality.
The other panelists should just come on up.
Okay,
Where they are, right?
so I'd like to invite the other panelists to join me, Patrick Herrig and Monique Coleman and Charles Minifield. You can stay. Yeah, you can stay. So I have some other panelists who I'm inviting up, and I'm going to ask them some questions as well. Patrick, I'm going to start with you. How are you doing today? Hi, how are you? Good. So you're an attorney for some diverse districts that we've talked about today. Can you really see a way that some of these suburban middle-class districts can be a part of the solution? And Myron says it's in their self-interest to do so. Can you talk about that? And is there a political will for them to do this?
Thank you. It's a great question. So you mentioned some of the districts that I work for, and I work for Hamilton Township here in Mercer County, and also for South Orange, Maplewood, and Essex County that was mentioned as diverse school districts, and they certainly are. But they experience their own challenges in maintaining diverse schools, in promoting integration within those school districts, and finding the will in their own communities to keep it going and to fight indifference to these situations. And so the luxury of me going later in the day is I've got to learn a lot of things today. And one of the things that was said early on by Myron, which I think is of critical importance here, is that schools benefit from diversity and integration. The data supports that schools are better in terms of college acceptance and readiness when they are integrated. Schools benefit socially and emotionally because students are less susceptible to bullying. They are less lonely in school, and they have overall better experiences. And when you're preparing students for a more nationally, culturally diverse nation and a global economy, these are important things. So I think it boils down to a actually very simple issue as to why suburban school districts like South Orange and Hamilton that are integrated and others that aren't right now want to get behind this, is because we can all agree we want our schools to improve. And a necessary component of that improvement is having an integrated, diverse school district. A key piece of that is this, and this is one of the great things about all of us coming together today, is that when you bring a lot of people in together, they have a different set of ideas that can enhance that marketplace of ideas, and then a better idea comes out of it. And that's the situation that these school districts themselves have decided to involve themselves in promoting integration and diversity. South Orange Maplewood, by way of example, has an intentional integration plan. And they are working through that right now. They have a new assistant superintendent of access and equity. So they've made a conscious decision to make sure that they're promoting integration within the school district. Hamilton Township Public Schools was the only large school district that joined the Latino Action Network lawsuit that's been mentioned a few times today. So we're one of 3 schools in the whole state out of the 600 that joined in. And I think that is largely because at Hamilton, there is a conscious commitment to finding ways to diversify and integrate and be involved in the conversation about how to do that in the best way. The big reason that they joined is because they knew that this was going to be a big case affecting lots of school districts, and they wanted to be able to put their 2 cents in so that when people were talking about the remedies and the solutions and the things that were presented here today, they could be a part of it. And so they are a proponent of finding ways to diversify and integrate. And I think there's a recognition by Hamilton and South Orange and quite a number of other school districts that if they are really committed to improving their schools, then they are committed to diversifying and integrating their schools.
Thank you. Monique, how are you doing?
Good, how are
Monique
you?
and I met the other day on a call. Monique, you're a school board member in a diverse suburb. The proposal said we should learn from both practices and challenges experienced in diverse places, like your school district. What can we learn from your experiences that we can apply to this case?
Thank you, and it was nice to meet you, and it's a pleasure to be here, and an honor actually to be on this panel here. It's good that I'm speaking after you because I come from a diverse district as well, much smaller, but I consider Highland Park School District in Middlesex County to be a small version of South Orange Maplewood, demographically, and certainly in terms of our district's commitment, to be intentionally diverse and equitable in all of our practices. And so I think for me, what resonates the most here is that, and the policy proposals that were put forth is that I'm in a position as a school board member in a district that is doing this work already to say, well, what next, right? After we integrate these schools, then what next? And that's a very big, important question, because as we know, integrating the schools is not the last and only step in the process of really realizing an equitable education for our students. So What I can say in my experience with Highland Park is that, and I am the chair of the Equity and Excellence Committee on our board, we have a board-driven strategic initiative around equitable practices in our academics as well as in our disciplines. So we looked at our discipline code. We put together a committee of stakeholders, including parents, teachers, students, board members, to really look point by point at our discipline code and how we could revise that code, or really actually we completely revolutionized that code so that it would not continue to perpetuate the kind of disparities that we know exist in discipline that we were experiencing in our schools. And that process is ongoing. You know, we put together this committee, this study group, to look at our code, to revamp our code, revolutionize it. And now we're still, as a board, looking at, you know, our data regularly. What's our discipline data? What are our numbers looking like? It's a constant practice and work of looking at the numbers and being real and honest about what's happening and where our policies and practices are working, where they're being effective, and where we need to, you know, sort of beef up what we're doing. And typically, what we found is that in terms of discipline, it's a cultural change for many people in the schools, and many personnel and staff are really working through their own what they bring to the table, right? Their own positionalities, and really developing the skill sets and the mindsets to implement the kind of policies that, you know, we as a board and our superintendents have really driven. And so we really try to make sure that our effort is truly bringing all voices to the table. And as messy and as difficult as that work gets, because it is, and very complicated, we don't let the complications deter us from staying the course. And I think that's really, really important to emphasize, because it's so hard to get this right and to see the kind of change like that I know I would want to see next month, you know, might not happen for another year, right? So it is this kind of process that we're engaged in, deeply committed to. So in terms of our academic disparities and inequities, we looked at, you know, the traditional areas of inequities, right? What do our AP honors classes look like? Our college prep classes, you know what the nickname for those classes were among the kids? The colored people's classes. That was the nickname that students and that kind of, you know, was attached to college prep classes. So we really had to look at where are the barriers? And we started by opening up AP honors and making sure that there would be AP honors options for students who may not traditionally feel like they belong in those classes. And now we're at the point where we've removed all the barriers. So now it's time to remove all the barriers. We don't need teacher recommendations anymore. We need to know that students who want to take the challenge and you know, go into an AP honors or honors class, they don't have the barriers to do that. They don't need a parent or guardian to sign off. They don't need a teacher recommendation. They just need to know within themselves this is something that they want to achieve. And then it's our responsibility as a district to provide the support for those students who are going to make that sort of a jump and a leap. And also to encourage students. When I talk about cultural mindsets and changes, even for the students themselves, feeling like you belong within a diverse school district is not always going to be there, right? So it's also this process of listening to students of color about their experiences, being honest about their experiences, and then listening to what they need to feel supported and being responsive to that. So, you know, we're, you know, constantly engaging in that work of getting input from students as well as to what they need and allowing that to help drive our policy initiatives and our directions. And in talking about the benefits, I will just say that most recently we received a report from a survey that our consultant on diversity and equity did among high school students. And just at one of the questions talked about the diversity of our courses in our school and particularly the high school. And one of the common thread in all the responses was the students wanted more diverse classes in sort of this geopolitical kind of topic areas of immigration or you know, housing and historical perspectives that were diverse, that represented the perspectives of different peoples, not this Eurocentric dominant model that dominates our curriculum. And for us, it was like, well, wait, the work that we're doing is actually working because we're shifting in many respects what students are even asking for and desiring and expecting in their curriculum. So I think, again, to the benefits to all the students to actually wanting to be in this diverse community and learn from it, and they're seeing the value in it, is really, to me, a critical takeaway as to how this work is so important. So I could talk more, but I just wanted to touch on some of the things that we've been doing as a district. And it did start with being intentional about our effort, doing a complete audit of our policies, across the board to see how our policies were driving the kind of disparities we were seeing, and having this ongoing process of intentionally addressing them.
Thank you. Charles, Dr. Mansfield. You're a distinguished professor. You're a dean of the School of Public Affairs and Administration at Rutgers University. As an administrator and as a citizen of the state of New Jersey and an educator, how does this discussion resonate with you? And can you tell us about how you are involved in this?
Sure. Thank you for having me. And thank you all for attending today. Okay, I think I'm on. I believe that universities play a very important role in this process. Obviously, we're the next step up from primary and secondary education, but I think there's two primary roles, and one of them builds off my colleagues' comments. Universities, our job is to bring together a diverse set of students, and Rutgers University, Newark, is the most diverse university in the country, and we've been held that position for 10 years running. I'm in the School of Public Affairs and Administration, and we're the most diverse public affairs program in the country. Having said that, I think flagship universities in particular should be leading the charge in respect to things like this. It's important for us to work with universities like King University, my colleague, Dr. Birdsell there, and other universities in the state to move the needle. Secondly, I think well, let me stay with that one for a second. So as a university, what are we doing? One of the things that's come out of the Black Lives Matter movement, the death of George Floyd and so on, is universities taking another look at their curriculum, to your point. That is, what are we offering that really changes the mindset of people to think more, be more social justice minded, to think about social equity, diversity, inclusion, and so on. So all of the deans got together and looked at our curriculums and said, rather than all of us trying to do this, let's think about it comprehensively and holistically and see what classes we can create, and then all of our students can take them without the duplication. That's probably been the most significant effort. The other thing that came out of that was, should we be offering certificates? Should we be offering concentrations, et cetera? Because as you can see, everybody is buying into this model, and now's the time to strike. If you want to desegregate, you'll never find a better time, at least in my lifetime, than right now. One of the most stark contrasts I've seen in media these days is commercials with a white husband, a black wife, and biracial children. A year ago, you wouldn't have seen that, but now it's every other commercial. We see same-sex couples in commercials. I was in the airport a couple of days ago, and it's just lined with, this is what America looks like. So I say all that to say, now is the time. Every company that's large in the Fortune 500 now has a diversity officer. They now have funds to provide educational institutions monies to encourage and facilitate diversity activities. So our role is to work in conjunction with primary and secondary institutions to provide that curriculum. Secondly, we have to be doing the research. Earlier, we saw some statistics. That's the sort of stuff that puts it in front of people. This is what it looks like. Now, there's some natural barriers to improving segregation. I mean, you can't account for private schools, magnet schools, charter schools. I'm in Newark, and they're everywhere. So you can only work within the confines of where you are. But what I found in my work is very comparable to everything I've heard. That is, you have to take a holistic approach. I do research looking at structural determinants of health, and they're all correlated. If you want to know anything about a person, you have to look at socioeconomic things, you got to look at demographics, and the list goes on. I can tell you with a fair degree of accuracy, if you just say to me, okay, black male from Mississippi, lives on a farm, went to an all-black high school, I can tell you what their future looks like to a fair degree of accuracy because the stats simply don't lie. You know, I'm from Mississippi. I grew up on a farm. My dad was a farm laborer. I went to an all 100% black school, high school and elementary. I went to a predominantly white institution for college all the way through 3 degrees. And the deck was stacked against me literally from the day I was born. So, you know, I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just simply pointing out the reality is it's very difficult for some people to make it, as we say. One of the barometers for success in this country is to own a home, to have a college degree, and all those other things that we are aware of. If you're gonna fix it, if you're gonna desegregate, the implications are clear. Wealth accumulation is higher. Income levels tend to equalize when you know students are together. The corrosive effects of segregation disappear. That is, academic students, when they're integrated, all of them tend to do better than when they're separated. There's lower investment in segregated neighborhoods, and hence the school system suffer. And I can go on. There's psychological impacts of having people in one place. I never knew it was a bad thing to go to an all-black school until I got to college. In the first semester, I realized that I was not as prepared as I thought I was when I went to school. I was one of the smart kids in my school. But after 6 weeks of college, I thought I was going to flunk out of college. I mean, so I won't belabor the point. So I applaud you for your efforts in moving this forward. And to answer your question directly, universities play a pivotal role in this process, and we should be heavily, heavily involved in every respect.
I know I'm running out of time, but if you could, in everyone on the panel, if you could in 1 minute or less, give me a word of advice to give to the group to what we should do that supports the mission. So.
Thank you. So in terms of, sorry. Thank you. In terms of the proposal, stay big. This is a problem that needs to be tackled on the statewide level, and it needs bold leadership at that level. As was indicated earlier, and it's been touched upon several times, there's 600 school districts, and they're all pointing in different directions, doing different things at different times with different board members. So the solution needs to be big, it needs to be robust and apply to everybody, and it's going to be tough. And we can't let the perfect be the enemy of good. We've got to do something and then tweak it and fix it along the way, but we've got to do something. And so I would say, keep the plans big and make them focused on a statewide solution, because then it will actually have real teeth that can make change.
Yes, and I would add to that, that the fact that it's statewide, the fact that every district is a part of it means that you can say, look, everybody's playing their role, and not one district doesn't have to make all the sacrifices. It's shared across the entire state. And the other point that can't be lost in the discussion is that when we see the gains from diversity and from kids getting high opportunity schools, it does not come at the expense of other students. In fact, everyone ends up doing better. And there's plenty of research to support that. And I think if people understand that it's actually they're not being asked to give up something, they're being asked to get something better. Much better. And so that's what we have to emphasize. And so that can quell the fears that people have.
Yeah. Again, I'm just going to pick up on, once we do get this passed, just those coalitions amongst school districts that are doing the same thing. It was very hard for us to find districts that were doing the kind of work that we were doing, specifically around restorative practices and discipline, detracking our math. So it's very hard to find the districts that are doing it. We need to have that kind of camaraderie, that kind of support network across New Jersey in these districts, especially as more and more districts start doing this work, and to lean on the resources of Rutgers University. I can't say enough about that. We leaned on researchers, Dan Beatty, and who does work around equity in math, and Gregory, who does discipline equity work right at the GSE at Rutgers, lean on them and bring them in their expertise. And then lastly, I would just say, emphasizing here to really center student voice and perspective, and in all ways affirm our students. It all is about what are the assets that our student have and I think sometimes that gets lost when we talk about integration and desegregation, that it's not about fixing students, it's about, fixing systems. And so especially now with this larger conversation about anti-CRT, and it's really about, not being able to talk about these issues, right, about the history of racism and how it impacts our current school systems, but really being clear about it. It really is about the students having what they need already, right? It's all about the system. The students already have what they need.
I just want to build on the resource piece. I think the critical piece is to determine where there are pockets of allies. For example, at Rutgers, I know the Cornwall Center is doing research in this area. I know that the Watson Institute at King University is doing work in this area. I know the New Jersey the Institute for Social Justice is doing work in this area, and knowing where all those resources are, and then you can figure out, the best map to, helping the process. That would be my advice.
Thank you. John? I leave you with these words in these current times. I believe school integration is the vaccination that will reduce and eliminate the pandemic of educational inequality.
So I'd like to thank all my panelists. Hopefully we can keep this conversation going. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Nice to share the panel with you.
Did you hear about what you're doing?
Yeah, it's not easy work.
Thank you, Professor Leslie Wilson, for moderating that experience, and to all of our panelists for their roaring endorsement of this proposal. We want to turn our attention just for a moment thinking about our lawmakers, and we do have one of our champions that will join us via Zoom. And so if our tech team can get Senator Joe Cryan, tee up his box, and I'll say a few things as he's preparing to speak with us. I just want to say a word about the type of support we currently have in our legislature. Independent of our governor deciding to do nothing about this, we do have some significant support from very significant leaders in our legislature. So we're happy to have Myla JC, who's the co-chair of the Committee on Public Schools, who has endorsed our proposal, who's endorsing our proposal. Oh, yeah, right. Obviously, we had Assemblywoman Sumter, who was here, who has also given support to the work we've done, in addition to getting an affirmative response from the Legislative Black Caucus to hold hearings around the state on school segregation. So that is a big win that we can trust the Legislative Black Caucus to help us push forward. Assemblyperson Wimberly is also a supporter of what we have laid out, and we know that not only has he been a sponsor of this experience, but Speaker Coughlin has also endorsed this proposal. So we have high-level leaders in the Democratic Party in our legislature that have endorsed this particular proposal, and it's up to us to hold them to it to get the work done. And even as I say that, I do want to also add that we had representation from Hamilton here on our panel. Actually, all three districts that intervened in the lawsuit, whether it was Pleasantville or Wildwood or Hamilton, all had representation here today, including the superintendent of Wildwood was here. So we do have those three school districts that have intervened in the land case that are on board with our proposal and will be a part of our theory of change and organizing. But we're grateful that we have Senator Cryan here with us. I'm excited that New Jersey has its own show. that we know Joe and Joe knows us, right? And so Senator Joe Cryan from the 20th Legislative District, we want to hear a few words for you, particularly an affirmative response on the legislative proposal that we put forth today.
Well, first and foremost, thank you. And to the panels that I had the opportunity to hear, thank you for that. I think the strongest part of the conference that I've heard so far is the coming together and the way you and the leaders of the conference have done so to bring in both academia, education experts, and lawmakers. And so many more policy experts that are needed, because this is a fight that requires, while it's about education, it requires education first. Frankly, the status quo is easy. And this is a significant difference, as we've talked about privately, along with my friend Paul Scully, to make sure that we educate lawmakers in terms of the process. I'm excited about about Assemblywoman Sumter's commitment to have the Black Caucus go around the state. It will be, I hope, an excellent educational opportunity. And I can tell you, I already picked up a couple legislative proposals from that speech, which was absolutely wonderful, and have my staff taking a look to see if we can get them drafted now, as well as some other things. This is going to be a long fight, right? We're not going to get this done in lame duck. And frankly, when you talked about the legislative partners that you have, nothing mean about it, but there's a whole lot lacking in my caucus. And we've got to do that as senators. You did mention the fact that you've had some discussions with the Senate president. The leadership has as well. We've got a lot of work to do. So I think the conference today, certainly the pieces I've heard have been frankly magnificent. Even enjoyed Mr. Britton's last closing comments. The reality of this is that you've got to tell New Jerseyans the issue here first. And while lawsuits will certainly spur, whether it's Pleasantville or Wildwood or the rest, but we've got to have folks understand that change is good for them. And because it is, and the studies show, the academia shows, the last panel brought out, the panel before that we're all better when we're more diverse. That is a significant challenge for all of us. One I'm more than willing to take on, because it sounds cliché, but it's not. When our children do better, we all do better. And frankly, I'm looking forward to the opportunity for helping make a difference in that. I also finally wanted to close with the idea, the housing crisis was mentioned, that the difference in policies and housing were mentioned as a leading cause of school segregation. I don't think anybody will argue it. But I don't want to lose the fight over the legislature's inability to solve the housing issue. I want to make sure people understand we're talking about school segregation. If that causes us to actually resolve other difficult issues, great, but let's keep the eye on the prize. We're not allowing our children to succeed. Let's stay with that and get to the point where we solve other issues as a result of it. It's just so important. You and I both know, when you go to a community, realtors say, go take a look at the school, see who's coming out. And you immediately get to the kind of housing policies and the segregation and all the things that go with it that people see far too often. I live in what I think is the 10th most diverse town now in the state of New Jersey, in Union, New Jersey. And I think not only is that a wonderful thing to say, it would be great that if we all lived in the even part of New Jersey where we all have the same balance. Nothing wrong with shooting for another goal like that. And I look forward to being part of the solution with you all. I thank you all for your participation. The insights have been magnificent, and look forward to getting some legislation done that helps the cause move forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Cryan. It's good to know that you have endorsed this effort, this movement, and we will continue to be in touch with you and your caucus as we move this forward. I think that's an awesome segue. And as we, again, I thank Senator Cryan for his presence and for his affirmation. That's a good segue for us to think deeply, profoundly about what our role is in the work. One of our participants, at least one of our participants, has asked, what can we do? And I know that is the question that all of us want to leave out here with. We know right now that we have inherited the fruit of indifference from previous generations, and we should refuse to allow another generation, any more New Jerseyans, to reap the bitter fruit, the rotten fruit of our indifference. So we must act. And here's some things that we can do immediately. We want to to receive your feedback. So we really hope that you will take this forum very, very seriously. That I did insist that over lunch, that the food will be just as nourished, that the conversation will be just as nourishing as the food. But this is a big part of the conversation, so that this conference is also a nourishing part of your week, and not just a number of hours that you sacrifice to be here. But this is a part of the organizing strategy. So making sure that you take seriously engaging this forum and doing some assessments of your own area, some power analyses of your own area and your own life, your own leadership, that will be pretty important. And on the regional level, we are hoping that you will engage your legislators directly. Engage your legislators directly. There are a host of ways to do that, but we trust that these are the people you put in office, maybe didn't put in office, but they still work for you. And because they work for you, that you will find ways on the regional level to engage them, but you'll also have some engagement with the governor's office and potentially even the governor's campaign over the next 5 weeks. Again, he's remained significantly silent, hideously silent on this issue. And so we want to make sure that he knows that even though these next 5 weeks, that this should be a campaign issue, because this is about the integrity of our state and the integrity of our Constitution, for which he is a trustee and a guardian as the leader, not just the leader of the Democratic Party, but as the executive of our state. In addition to that, we will have weekly Zoom check-ins on Sundays. I hope you will take some time. I know many of you all probably have leisure days on Sundays, but we want to get to work on Sundays. As soon as I log off from church on Sunday, I want to start thinking about this work with as much vibrancy as possible. We won't start this Sunday because you gave us so much time today. We'll start next Sunday on the 3rd. We'll start this work on October 3rd at 7 p.m. I want us to think of these as kind of like brush harbor experiences. My ancestors, in order for them to have real planning and worship experience, they had to run into the brush harbors of the antebellum South, outside of the gaze of the plantation, where they strategize escapes and strategize resistance and strategize building and asserting their own humanity. That's what we're going to do on Sunday evenings. We're going to practice our own brush harbor experiences for every Sunday from the 3rd until we get to Election Day. And so that's going to be really important. So put that on your calendars now, pencil it in, type it in, however we do calendaring these days. Make it a part of your weekly experience as we think of ourselves as a statewide organizing body, a statewide organizing unit, a statewide coalition for this work. Yeah, I think so. All right, we have a 4-day national leadership training that will happen Thursday through Sunday, December 9th through the 12th. A 4-day national leadership training. Some of those topics you can see there, but we're going to be learning about power. Having a power analysis is important to figuring out where we put pressure. Who are our targets? Who can we flip? Who do we just need to allow to be loud and wrong in the corner by themselves? We're going to have an analysis of power. Understanding self-interest is also important in this work. How do you do one-on-one organizing? Relational organizing is the way we talk about this in some places. And what does it mean to have an effective meeting? Strategic planning. You want to be a part of this 4-day training. It's happened. I don't know how many people have been trained, but the numbers are really deep. Yeah, there's some alums of that training experience here. Great, yeah, at least three in here. So we want to put that on your calendar as well. December 9th through the 12th, Thursday through.
We should talk to the professor. We think it's going to be at Rutgers, Brunswick, at the Labor Management School, staying at the University Inn.
Good, you heard.
And by the way, Joe wrote back, I guess he wasn't done. He said, tell them to push their legislators every day. He said, lobby. He just let me
Joe, the Joe we know and the Joe that knows us, said push back on his colleagues. And if he's one of your representatives, keep him to task as well. We want to keep pushing our legislators. And we now know that we have at least one senator on the inside who will be working this for us. And so again, we do thank Senator Joe for being with us, but we do take his word seriously that we want to put as much daily pressure. Obviously, you can't do it every day, but you can multiply yourselves, right? You can recruit people in your network to help push this message every single day between now and the election. But put on your calendar this training, December 9th through the 12th. Yep, ready for you. All right, we have one of the great leaders of our state who's getting ready to come and offer us some closing remarks. He is the mayor of Montclair, but he is also the new president of NJEA, New Jersey Education Association, and one of the sponsors of this event. He has been a friend to our effort. He has been a friend to the movement, and he's been a friend to parents and to educators and students for so many years. And so I'm delighted to welcome to the stage, welcome to the platform, Mayor Sean Spiller, President Sean Spiller, as he speaks from whatever hat he decides he has on today. When you're that important, you have to decide who you're going to be in that moment. So he's going to come as president, as mayor, to give us some marching orders and give us some encouragement on how we fight this fight.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and maybe I'll come as dad. You know, I think we all know how important this is, right? When we talk about this, I say that with a smile, but I say it with seriousness as well. You know, I'm the father of two young boys, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And for me, living in Montclair, I think one of the reasons my wife and I are there are because of the values that Montclair is all about, and certainly it spoke to us as a young family, making sure that we are in a diverse community. I think hopefully people have heard, you know, what Montclair stands for and what we're all about, but we also know there's always work to be done. But I think it really is a testament to everything that's going on here today. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't first say I want to congratulate one of my colleagues and friends, Marie Bliston, for the award that she received today, well earned. And I think that's important for me as a high school science teacher myself, anatomy and physiology, biology teacher in Wayne, now on leave, serving as the president of 200,000 members of the NJEA. I had the opportunity to be vice president under Marie Bliston, and I can tell you the work of a justice-centered union, it's a nice space to be in, where as an African-American male, I can look at an ally like a Marie Bliston and watch her lead an organization like ours in difficult conversations, talking about institutional racism, talking about the role that education has to play, talking about the changes that we can help effectuate, when all the time I'd see the voices that were there saying, wait, that's not our lane, or that's not our space, or do we really want to talk about that? And she really helped to blaze that trail. And I think that was so important for me and so important for us as an organization. So certainly owe a deep debt of gratitude to her. And certainly as we move forward and I step into this role now, you know, very proudly, as I said, there's so much work to be done. You know, it's important to hear, and listening to all the panelists and listening to all the conversations that we heard today. If nothing else, I think though we are all hearing in a way what we know, right? Of course, integrated schools are important. Of course, they lead to better outcomes for our students. Of course, we've got to address all of the pieces for all the important reasons that lead to student success, student outcomes, that opportunity for the next generation. That's important. The other piece of it is, and probably the much harder one, and I think that's the focus even in closing here, of how do we do it, right? How do we get there? You know, and I think a lot of individuals have looked at a lot of different ways that we might try and do that. But it definitely starts with education. We know as educators that knowledge is power. So we've got to make sure that we have conferences like this. We are out there, whether it be legislative Black Caucus or others, you know, making sure we are educating as many people as possible on the value of integrated schools, but also the fact, I think it's important when we make sure we disarm people to say this is not, again, this is not at the expense of any students. This benefits all students. That's important for parents to hear as well, because we know the resistance that's going to be out there, and we know the pushback that we're all going to receive. So we've got to stay focused on that work. And as I was asked to just give some closing remarks today, I certainly wanted to, yes, acknowledge, you know, how proud we are, again, representing those 200,000 educators. Very proud that once again, 3rd year in a row, and we're always right at the top, we are ranked as the #1 schools in the nation. We wear that, you know, with a badge of pride and honor. But we also always say too, but we know that there are many cases where our schools and our students in those communities do not have the same opportunities that others do. They do not have the same ability and the same opportunity to success because they don't have the resources. They're in an underserved community for so many years, right? They have challenges that others don't face. We know that this pandemic has been devastating, yes. But as we know also, yes, it has laid bare issues that have existed for far too long, 400 years, right? So we've got to talk about those things in honest conversations, and we've got to look at ways and say, how do we address them? We know there's a lot of options out there and people talking about these pieces. Yes, I think we've got to, highlight and talk about some of the successes when we talk about school funding or Abbott decisions, or, finally getting commitments in terms of dollars coming in to help our communities as a whole. It's got to be recognized for sure. We've got to also say, what else can be done? And I think oftentimes when we talk about segregation issue, we do talk about housing, right? And I think the senator even noted it in his remarks, right? In a roundabout way. But often we have to look at it and say, what else can be done? Yes, housing is a concern, housing is a problem, but what can be done in our schools directly? And maybe there is an opportunity, right, to do that in a much faster way than you can with housing, right? We know that's a generational issue and that takes a tremendous amount of time, but it also still has to be looked at. And we have to tie that into the work that we're doing around our schools. We've got to have communities that are supported. And I always say to people all the time, because I can tell you in this position, we would always hear, we would get the conversations, and I'd never agree with any one of them when people would say, we've got these failing schools. I'd say, we have no such thing, right? There is no such thing as a failing school. There is a community that has been under-resourced, that has been concentrated in poverty, that has been, deprived of economic opportunity. There are communities that don't have the supports. And we talk about that village. When we take a village and we make sure it has nothing that it needs, you're going to get a school that reflects that. And we've got to recognize and acknowledge that, to say we've got to address broad pieces if we're going to really talk about equity and opportunity. But schools play a major role, right? And we all in this room, I think that's a space that we can play in, right? When we talk about being the president of the NJA, I think it speaks a lot to the fact that here we are as supporters in this work, certainly Building One New Jersey, great work done by all, but we're here, the largest association in the state, representing educators with a voice, saying that we are committed to desegregating our schools. We are committed to ensuring that this remains a priority for everyone involved in the educational space, to say, how do we work together to get this done? Because no one group is going to be able to pull it off alone. So we've got to remain partners in this work. And that's what we are committed to doing. So, in closing, I think I just wanted to say, good thing somebody else has got a mouse too. Thanks, Paul. But I just want to say, this isn't an end, right? This isn't a, hey, all right, great, everybody, thanks so much. We had a great conference. Hope you all enjoyed yourselves. And I did too. Great sessions, and I'll see you soon. This is a start point. This is a jumping off point. This is a conversation we need to continue moving forward together. We need to exercise all of our opportunities and leverage points that we can, whether it be conversations with legislators, conversations with governors, and others that we have a space or a voice in, to say, what are we going to do about this, and how do we continue to move forward, whether it be incrementally or big, bold steps that we can put forward together. So I'll just say this. I want to thank you. I want to thank you because of your commitment to this work. I want to assure you that you have the commitment of 200,000 educators statewide, who also know that we've got to talk about this issue and we've got to help resolve this issue. And we also know that as educators, we are the ones, right? When we talk about that next generation, we are the ones that can really have such a great impact on not only our students, but the conditions that our students learn in, and the situation that they find themselves in, the opportunities they're afforded. And we stand here ready to do that moving forward together. So thank you very much, everybody, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Spiller, for another endorsement, rousing endorsement of our plan. I just want to say, to give us the summary of our plan again, and then we're going to have our closing remarks and prayer from one of my favorite persons in the world. What we're not simply talking about diversity. I gotta say that. That's important for me. This is about opportunity, and this is about power, because that's what segregation is about. Segregation is about the lack of power. And so as we do this work, we are thinking about how we abolish racial isolation and also this deep concentration of poverty that shows up in our schools. And so in order to do this, we have to reform and strengthen the ed department's civil rights capacity and enforcement. We want to strengthen the state funding formula so that it advantages and incentivizes diverse and integrated schools. We want to direct and increase funding to local integration and desegregation best practices where diversity already exists. I think that's important that we name. It already exists in so many of the areas that many of us populate. We want to reform our interdistrict public school choice program to advance integration within regions based on opportunity analysis. We want to reform legislation to require charters to advance integration goals and not promote segregation. We want to support pro-integration magnet schools in urban areas and for county schools. We want to amend the school consolidation bill that is currently just about saving money, but it also needs to be about desegregation. And we wanted to prohibit racist secessions that is continuing to happen. And we wanted to uphold the affirmative obligation of integration around race and around class. And we want to increase and enforce the Mount Laurel obligation. We want to, as we are doing the work of integrating schools, we know that also requires residential integration as well. That is our proposal. That is what we have heard again and again, experts, community leaders, educators, politicians, lawmakers. We've heard them throughout this last hour or so endorse this, support this, and asked by Senator Joe himself to make sure that his colleagues do this. And I'm excited about that. Every Sunday, we're going to meet in the Brush Harbor on Zoom from October 3rd through Election Day. And when we are in these experiences, we are strategizing. We are planning actions against well, not just against, we're planning actions for integration. And if planning actions for integration means planning actions against the governor, that is what it is, right? But we will be planning to make sure that this is a priority item for our legislators and a priority item for our governor. And then on December 9th through the 12th, am I saying that right? 9th through the 12th, yes, December 9th through the 12th, we'll be meeting hopefully at Rutgers, New Brunswick for a 4-day training experience there, national training, so that we make sure that we understand how we're moving forward and what we're moving forward, and that we're owning and leveraging our power for the things that matter most to us, but also the things that matter most for the most vulnerable and the most unprotected. So make sure you have those dates in mind. Make sure you continue to digest and read this policy proposal. And as we close this day, has it been a good day? All right. I need to see hands right now. Who will be joining us for these Sunday experiences? I need to see hands right now. Okay. And let's be honest, Good. Who's willing to help put pressure on the governor? I like it. We're gonna put pressure on them. Now I have a photographic memory. I will remember this, right? And who will help us put pressure on our respective legislators, including outsized pressure on the Senate president, and also giving our assembly speakers some leverage and some room to fight for us. Can I see those hands again? Okay, good. I feel like we have some commitments in here, Paul. I feel like we have some commitments. So as we're leaving today, I want us to continue thinking about those particular ways that we can engage in this long list that we've already offered of how we'll be mobilizing in the next 5 months, and what will come out of those Sunday Brush Harbor experiences that may require us to show up and put boots on the ground in certain places that we know our most powerful leaders will be. We'll have our last word. Is there anything else I need to? No more overtures. Okay, we'll have our, thank you everyone for being here today. I hope that you see this as an investment in your own power, as an investment in your communities, but more so an investment in the education system of this great state that we all love, that we know can be better. That's why we're here, because we have a hope that this state can be better than it has been. And we still believe in the promise of Brown v. Board. And we believe that this is a part of the unfinished work of the civil rights movement that we have no choice but to fight for ourselves. Are we receiving questions and comments from the floor?
I want to say that we got people's questions, whatever degree the experts answer them, we're going to make sure they get those and try to get them answered.
Sure. So if you do have particular questions, if you could submit those via writing in the cards. And if we did not answer your question, all questions that we received, we will make sure that you get a written response. If your names were on them and we have your registration information. If we have your registration information, we do know how to get questions to you. It'll be a priority that we get some of those answers to you based on the availability of the persons that you directed those questions to. I'm going to invite now for our last brief meditation and our closing prayer, our closing centering moment, our sending forth moment, the Reverend Dr. Robert S. Harvey. He is an education leader. He is an author. He is committed to the work of abolition. He has written a phenomenal piece on that particular subject matter. He represents part of our national partners, sort of our national partnership, our national people who are around the country who are invested in making sure that we win this issue here, because you've seen national names all day. That's because New Jersey is a national place. What happens here matters for the rest of the nation. And so we invite one more of those national partners to come and give us a charge and give us a sending forth. Dr. Harvey?
Dietrich Bonhoeffer in the 1920s lifted up a thought that in order for us to do this work together, we cannot just do this work with strategy and do this work with systems, but we must also do this work grounded in an integrative ethic that privileges the fact that all of us come into this world as human. And so I sit here and I stand here today grounded in the idea that the way that this work moves forward is that it must be grounded in a humanist and a humane ethic that sees the humanity in all of us as we walk together hand in hand toward a more integrated vision for schools in the state of New Jersey. That invites us to not only think about the ways in which we advance a profound legislative agenda, but also think about the ways that we do something that I think Howard Thurman would call spatial relationality. How do we use space together to build relationship around a shared vision for what it means to be human in this world? And so if we believe that all young people who are human deserve humane treatment in our schools, humane experiences in their homes, humane realities in their communities, then all of us who share the space called Earth must be willing to do the work of relationship building, even when that means building relationship with those we would rather not build relationship with. That is why Thurman's idea of spatial relationality is a difficult one, but one that must ground this kind of legislative ethic, because it requires us to not just cross the aisles, but to even cross to understand other people's ethical truths, and to invite them into a conversation of suspending their truth in order to discover the human that lives within us all. It is that same ethic that grounded the abolitionists of Frederick Douglass. It is that same ethic that grounded the abolition of Sojourner Truth. It is that ethic that grounded the abolition of even Mr. Brown, who believed in a spirit of rebellion to envision a humanist world whereby all of us could be human together. And so I invite you, as you prepare to leave this place grounded in using the power of relationship to envision a more human world whereby integration is not just realizable, but becomes the vision of what it means to do well in this world, to have a witness in this world, and to walk a certain way in this world. It is with that I invite in my tradition, which is the Black Christian tradition, to end with a final prayer that will allow all of us to leave this space, not just empowered, but grounded in that spatial relationality that I believe that God and the ancestors co-conspire together daily to help us achieve. It is with that I invite you to take whatever posture you believe is the posture of prayer as I lift up a final prayer for our time together. Oh, great God, the God who created this world, we thank you for the time that you've allowed us to share space together. But God, we don't just thank you, but now we call upon the power of you and the ancestors who ground our work to send us across this great garden state to realize a more humane vision for the world.
God, we thank you that we have the examples of those whose backs borne the stripes of this world to know that not only is integration possible, but it is indeed the witness and way of this world. We thank you, O great God of justice and mercy, that every day you invite us to be human. You invite us to take on the task of creating the conditions for others to live in the fullness of their humanity. So God, we leave this place not just believing that these words are powerful. We leave this place not just grounded in a legislative agenda, but God, we leave this place grounded to act on the things we have said. We leave this place, God, centered to become the things that we believe can be. And God, we leave this place knowing that we are not fighting indeed for a future generation, but God, we are indeed fighting for a generation that lives right now in the balance of what we do at 301 today. So we leave this place now, God, renewed with specific ask of those who lead in this human world, but knowing that your wind and your grace and your mercy is behind us and beside us, that will carry us through this work into the future that we envision. We thank you now in the name of all that is good and perfect. We thank you now in the name of all that is just and right. We thank you now in the name of those things, grace and mercy. And we thank you, God, in the name of that which is the grounding force of my life, hope. Thank you, God, for the hope that this work can be done, will be done, and shall be done, that all of us might experience a better humanity in this world. It is in that great name we do pray, grounded by the ancestors. Let all those who believe in this commitment lift your voice and say, amen.
We only 10 minutes. We're good, 10 minutes.